The embarrassing era I wish you'd forget. This is what our cringe phase was like. When I was 8, I had a leather jacket, a mullet, wore sunglasses to school, and insisted that everyone called me Razor. When I was 8, I wore a Hawaiian lei and insisted people call me Mango, but only during recess. It was because I was trying to create a tribe, and I don't understand why I wanted to do it to this day. I don't feel like I had one, which makes me concerned that I'm in my cringe phase right now. I thought white hair would be cool. I proceeded to bleach my hair into oblivion. A hairdresser sold me the industrial strength peroxide and was like, "Oh, just don't tell anyone where you got it from." It was so bad it would break like dandelions in a strong wind. I was in my 20s, straight and black. It was not a good look. I mean, I was getting close to Deadpool level of scalp burns. Mine's pretty standard. I was a metalhead obsessed with the concept of real metal and telling people that their music tastes sucked. When I was in high school, the rise of prank videos and public trolling were the hit videos on YouTube, so I tried making my own. My first video was called The Crab Walk, where I just walked around a busy town square doing a stupid walk and face that looked like a crab to me. I thought that it was funny, but years later, I watched it and realized that everyone thought I had a mental disability. I wish I had it so I could show you, but I deleted it shortly after watching it and nearly throwing up and pooping myself from cringing so hard. I thought I was a raver. I wore tons of bracelets, neon shirts with baggy jeans, but I was too much of a wuss to actually go to a rave. I just went online in rave chat rooms. I even dyed my hair pink. Frick, I still get red with embarrassment just thinking about it. Hating on everything that was considered mainstream, especially girls that tried to look good and were all about makeup and pop music. Hello YouTube, and welcome to a new Minecraft Let's Play. My 9-year-old brother has just started this phase. I can't wait to show everyone at his wedding. Oh boy, well, I waited until my 30s to give that a go, and frankly, even though I wasn't quite a cringy 9-year-old, if anyone brought up any of those videos in a public setting, I would die. That wedding video is gonna be devastating, oh my god. Mullet and glam metal. Posters of glam metal D-bags on my bedroom walls. Frick. Wicca. I dyed my hair black and wore all black clothing and wore a big pentagram around my neck.
Oh, me too. For a short while there, I thought I'd tapped into some kind of hidden ancient folklore. How was I supposed to know anyone with sandalwood candles and GeoCities account could just make stuff up and put it online?
Well, to be fair, sandalwood smells amazing. I can see why you got sucked in. I was a weeboo for years. Between the ages of 12 through 16, I thought anime and Japan were the best things ever and obnoxiously pushed it on people and thought I was so awesome. It was awful now that I look back.
I worked at a comic store. I hated kids like you. Another weebo here. I'd say random Japanese words and run around educating people on the wonders of Japan. I drew only in anime style. I played only Japanese video games. I still like anime, but without all the cringe-inducing actions.
I was crap posting on various forums across the internet. Now I do all of my crap posting in one place. I never washed my face, had bad acne, and constantly preached about how little I cared what other people thought of me. Spoiler alert, I cared a lot. I was also a weeb and was seriously convinced I was Japanese in a previous life. I was 13. I unironically had a sticker on my shoulder bag that said, "You laugh because I'm different. I laugh because you're all the same." I was one of those, I'm not like other girls, girl with the crazy hair colors and the nose piercing.
Just like all of the other girls.
As a 13-year-old girl, crying to my parents about how no boys were interested in me, so I'd never have a boyfriend. I still don't get how my dad was able to keep a straight face while he was comforting me. He's awesome. I used to have this cheap trench raincoat that you buy all folded up in a bag from Walmart or wherever. I'd walk around in the hot sun with dollar store sunglasses and that thin plastic sheet of a coat and pretend that I was a character from The Matrix. I was 13. I might win this one. I was an Otherkin for a year. Jeez, and now you all know I am submitting my answer anonymously. I was very similar. I was a furry Otherkin, meaning I drew furry stuff and thought I was a cat in a past life. But I didn't realize it fit the definition of otherkin or furry back then. I was 13 and very into the Warrior Cats book series, and there happened to be a forest like in my backyard, so I'd run around there and pretend to be a cat. It ended the summer before I entered high school. Then my super hulark phase began. Oh, and also I had braces, glasses, frizzy hair that I didn't take care of, and exclusively wore sweatpants and fleece quarter zip turtlenecks. Fedora, fingerless gloves, Ghost Buster messenger bag. I've never seen Ghost Busters.
The biggest cringe here is that you haven't seen Ghost Busters yet.
The ultimate cringe here is that now everyone is typing Ghostbusters as two separate words. I was that guy who wore that one Cookie Monster hat and drank Monster. I was 9 at the time, my god.
Were you also a quickscoper on Modern Warfare 2 at any point?
I went through a phase in 8th or 9th grade where I deliberately mismatched clothes because I thought it was artistic and edgy. I really just looked like a dork wearing a flannel long-sleeved shirt, a no fear shirt with a pair of velvet burgundy jeans. I went through a semi-emo skater phase a few years later where everyone thought I was just a goth, but it wasn't even remotely close to the cringe of my 8th and 9th grade years. Hanging out with antisocial people, so I'd take traits from them, like always being on my phone and not going to any parties. Never getting a haircut, but at the same time not styling my hair. It was basically a bold cut-cross emo fringe. And being a music elitist. I started listening to hip-hop, but not really. The way I saw it, Eminem was the #1 rapper and the only good one. I'd listen to him and no one else. I thought I was so cool when I showed another kid Lose Yourself. Ugh. Hey, you remember that girl from middle school who wore all black, only listened to The Cure and dashboard confessional-esque emo, would only talk in sardonic half-answers or through obscure literary quotes, and generally had an obnoxious air of superiority that she thought wouldn't show through the illusion of depression that she put out? Yeah, we sucked. Former emo girls unite. I found obscure holidays, like Ferris Wheel Day and Brownie Day, and talked about them. I also, in class, would just toot and not even care, even if I ripped a really loud, smelly one. Getting melodramatic about everything related to a girl. Thinking my first serious girlfriend, who was a terrible person in hindsight, was the only one I could ever be with and my only chance for happiness. Even though 99% of the time we were together, I was miserable. Spending way too much of my time preoccupied with her, or missing out on other great things in life because I'd rather sit around and do nothing with her. I had this scene phase where I'd throw money at Hot Topic and buy Pikachu shirts and wear them outside. I'd wear striped socks over my school uniform, joined anime club with a bunch of weebs, and started talking in Japanese. I'm Vietnamese. It was so cringy, oh god.
I always pictured weebos as being white kids, or in my case, Hispanic. I've never considered other Asian people could also be weebos as well.
Huh. The narrator did a video lately that gave him the impression that the vast majority of Asia had a pretty negative outlook on Japan, at least in the older generations due to some conflicts in the 20th century, or the perception that Japanese people looked down on them. But this has made me Google it, and it seems like Vietnam is a place where even the older people wouldn't give you flack for being outwardly supportive of so much Japanese stuff. Obviously, this is all generalized stuff that I've read on the internet, so feel free to discuss or correct me in the comments. It's really fascinating. Obesity and acne instantly made me the go-to kid to be made fun of. It made me so depressed I never did my hair, barely cleaned, and never brushed my teeth. I didn't want to do anything at all. So I became more and more disgusting until my body couldn't take it, and I became incredibly ill over and over again. So I started cleaning myself more, I started dressing better, and I started eating better. 60 lost pounds later and a fairly nice wardrobe, and I've become the silent kid at college campus who spends most of his time alone, gladly, but I'm going for a teaching degree because I love being in front of a crowd of people. I routinely wrote songs for strangers on the internet to make up for my crippling loneliness. What was my cringe phase like? Wait, you mean it can end? My cringe phase had phases. That's how bad it was. We started with the metal phase in 2008, with a musical diet that consisted of the likes of Disturbed, Godsmack, and Rise Against. I dyed my hair dark blue and wore only band t-shirts. I feel bad for my parents driving me when I insisted we listened to metal and I sing to it. Then came the nice guy phase. I didn't understand why I wasn't drowning in a cubic mile of women's crotches because I was such a gentleman. So I decided it was probably just that drove them away. The fedora likely helped too in hindsight. Moving on, we arrive at the oh my god so random XD phase, where Cheeseburger, with a Z, was the funniest website, Smosh was the greatest YouTube channel to ever exist, and bacon or rainbows or cat memes or a combination were the pinnacles of comedy. The fedora made a return here, oh no. I also only ate health food and shamed anyone who ate junk food because I guess I needed something to get above? More on that in a second. And then the everything mainstream sucks phase. I couldn't enjoy things just because a lot of people liked them. While I admit I still get a good feeling out of finding something that's not very well known, I don't go around telling everyone that the music I listen to and the games I play are superior to theirs. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My cringe phase was basically a sliding window. When you're 18, it's 6 months ago. When you're 20, it was a year ago. When you're 25, it was 3 years ago. When you're 30, it's 5 years ago.
And when you're me, it's your entire life.
You should stop worrying about how you were in the past and just remember that you enjoyed doing what you did. I used to love rage comics, and now honestly I think that they're the most unfunny, low-effort, and downright stupid things I've ever been into. But when I liked them, I had a great time reading them and I'd laugh my butt off. Your tastes will always change. What matters is that you enjoy what you do, even if you won't in the future. I was 14 and wrote emo poetry and nobody understood me. Oh, and I'd ask out guys by writing them love letters or Facebook messaging them. As a girl, I hit puberty and a big Nirvana stage simultaneously at around 11. I went to a middle school with about 400 kids and was pretty easily the tallest of any of them. I just grew like a frickin' weed overnight. I was this gangly, grungy, head-banging mess. Wearing all black, listening to emo music, and being deep in my feelings. I thought I could make a cool YouTube channel playing mobile games. I didn't really have a good computer to run games on, but I found a jailbroken app that can screen record games. It was very laggy since I didn't have a good phone, so the games always kept crashing in mid-recording. I still uploaded those damn videos. Also, the screen recorder let you record your voice, so I had really bad commentary. My voice was sometimes muffled since I didn't realize that I put my finger over the mic. I look back on those videos and oh boy, I cringed so hard and I've just deleted them. Long hair parted in the middle and huge Coke bottle glasses. Flannel shirts every day with ripped jeans. I was really grunge. In middle school, I only wore polo shirts and had really ugly glasses. My hair was a mess and had braces. I then transitioned into the XD phase, wore those t-shirts that had puns on them like "Get Off My Grill" with a grill and food on it, and thought that I was so emo because I loved MCR? I was a hot mess, man. If you want to see photos of people sharing their cringy phases, check out the Blunder Years on Reddit. I was a wigger. Let's see if that passes the censors. I thought I was cool growing up around black kids and emulating black people. In reality, I just looked stupid doing it. Oh man, I remember the wiggers. I thought they were so dumb even as a little kid. Damn, son, you grew up in a rich suburban neighborhood and you get a sunburn from a full moon. Pull your pants up. I was that kind of atheist. You know, the one who looks down on people for believing in God. I used to think I was one of the most smart motherfrickers alive because I didn't believe in the stupid Bible and those silly myths. And then college happened. I met a lot of really smart, caring, and awesome Christians. I even fell in love with a Catholic girl, something that my teenage self swore never to do. I realized I was being a butthole for criticizing others over what they believed in, what they connected with, and what makes them feel like they have a purpose in life. So I chilled the F down. I'm still an atheist, but I respect other people's beliefs the same way that I like my views respected. Hey folks, I know that the narrator has from time to time ticked off a viewer or two by talking about some of the more harmful tendencies of organized religion, generally Christianity, but let me just say that this guy is essentially what all atheists or agnostics should aspire to be. Don't be a jerk about other people's religions if they're not harming people or forcing their views on others. Want to be edgy as F, born in the wrong generation, classic rock kinda kid. I think anyone who isn't into top 40 stuff goes through that phase, because classic rock is the next most accessible genre of music. Once I started exploring more genres, I broke out of that shell, thank God. Being thrown into a public school as a whiny foreign white girl who had friends that thought they were bloods. We didn't have any red bandanas, so we wore those generic red tea towels? Not even kidding, I hate myself for that. I wore a colander on my head to school because I was a pastafarian?
I mean, this isn't cringy, it's frickin' hilarious.
Wait, there are people who actually took the pastafarian thing seriously? I like all music except for country and rap. I used to say that, and then I discovered bluegrass, rockabilly, and Johnny Cash and a slew of good hip-hop artists. There's also a bunch in the all music category which I don't like or haven't heard of. I went through an all-out Naruto phase. I spoke broken Japanese, I bought my manga collection to school, and I wore the headband in public. I like to pretend that I ceased to exist from 12 through 16. Where do I start? First, there was the edgy phase. Think stupid hair, fringe over the eyes, first a terrible ginger bob, then dyed black, the black jeans with an unnecessary amount of belts and zips, the black nail polish, purple lipstick and fingerless gloves. I looked edgy as heck, and I regret every moment of it. Next came the, oh shit, I'm actually an awkward nerd. Why bother hiding it under layers of emo phase? Wore a fedora unironically, lived off of Mountain Dew and Doritos, got in arguments on the internet with strangers over whether Star Wars or Star Trek was better. I've since ditched the fedora and nice guy attitude, but I'm pretty sure that the image has stuck with me. That misunderstood genius phase that teenagers go through where they try to act super edgy and secretly think that they're better than everyone else. But it's okay because I'm not like that. I am better than those kids. Sorry everybody, I win. Overweight, baby face, angsty, believed punk and metal were true music and that everyone else was an idiot. Self-proclaimed nice guy and that girls only liked D-bags, no interesting qualities and obnoxious as all hell. 14 through 18 was a tough time for me. I was 12 when Linkin Park released Hybrid Theory, and I fell in love with the album and band. I wore a bunch of clothes similar to them. You know, really lame workers' shirts, cargo pants and shorts, short, spiked hair. Granted, I was 12, but still. Giant weeboo. I was growing out of it when Naruto got popular, or I would have been the kid who wore the headband to school. It's not a cartoon, Mom, it's anime! Could have been the statement of my life. My phase was most of my 20s. I'm in my mid-30s now. I wanted to talk politics with everyone, regardless of if you were sitting next to me on an airplane or one of my in-laws at the dinner table. I'd ask questions and pretend to be interested in what the other person would say, but really I'd just be waiting to rattle off my own aggressively liberal or progressive opinions so I could feel good if they'd agree or argue if they disagreed. I just cringed into the earth's mantle while writing that. I'm still to the left of most Americans, but I hate it when I see people in their 20s acting like that because it reminds me of a version of me that I'm not proud of, and I wish I could spare them the cringe. I was an emo kid that wore eyeliner, straightened his hair, and wrote crappy poetry and posted it on his Xanga page. I think I'm in a cringe phase right now. I'm 41 and I found myself telling kids, by which I mean anyone under 39, that they've grown so much, or they look so much like their parents, or they should be ashamed they don't know Led Zeppelin. I saw the Struts at Carolina Rebellion and my first thought was that their parents must be so proud. At the same show, I also told a massive skinhead that he should be ashamed of himself for littering. I sincerely hope that in a few decades I'll give less Fs and be awarded entry into the maximum cringe phase of elderly butthole. I'd get on that social media app Path and DM all of the girls I saw on there, asking them why their Path account said they went to bed at 8:30 because that's way too early for a grown kid like yourself to be going to bed, and stuff like that. Mine was a, oh my god, I'm so random and quirky, lol, phase. It doesn't help that I grew up with the internet being easily accessible. My cringe phase was my screen names on AIM, by which I mean AOL Instant Messenger for you kids. Looking back on it now, it just screams regret and cringe. I used to wear my clothes inside out thinking I was cool. Oh, the teenage years. Middle school. Super quiet and awkward, boy crazy even though all the boys thought I was crazy, lanky as F, and oh yes, blue eyeshadow was literally my favorite thing ever. You know, for me, it was probably my brony phase. I became a walking meme lord.
That's impossible. Most meme lords are too fused to their gaming chairs.
Clothes that glowed under black lights, mushroom everything, and I once went to school with a pacifier necklace. Please, someone just put me out of my misery. In middle school, I was really into wearing the color blue. I even wore blue eyeliner with blue mascara with all blue clothes. Not sure why. One day I wore a red shirt and got so many compliments that I decided to branch out in the color spectrum. Looking for self-validation in boyfriends, talking about doing the deed publicly, and posting online. I was a brony. I had that stuff plastered all over my room, shirts, the works. Gynecologists and OBs. What is the most mind-blowing thing a husband or boyfriend has said? Story from my internship. Checked a woman who was not progressing in labor and thought, that's not a head. Sure enough, the baby was breech. She was a very tiny woman, and this was a large baby, so it was pretty clear that she would need a C-section. She was a recent immigrant from a small third-world country, didn't have a partner with her, and spoke absolutely no English. Unfortunately, nobody in the unit spoke her language. I tried my best to mime and explain what was happening and what we were recommending. She nodded yes, but I had a strong sense she didn't understand the explanation. We sent somebody down to housekeeping and the cafeteria, hoping we could find any hospital staff who could translate. Fortunately, we found someone able to translate. It turns out that she understood the baby was breech, but that she thought we would have to literally cut her open and kill her in order to save the baby. Her relief and joy when she finally understood what the plan was something I won't forget. The staff member from housekeeping was wonderful and stayed to support her until she went into the OR. My mum was a general practitioner. She once had a 15-year-old girl come in who had a pregnancy test show positive, but was adamant that she couldn't be pregnant. My mum confirmed the pregnancy, but the girl still refused to believe it was true. She went on to explain to my mum it was impossible for her to get pregnant because her boyfriend had told her that if she laid completely still during the deed, then she wasn't technically doing it and couldn't get pregnant. I was kind of refraining from commenting on any of these stories until I read this crap. This is the kind of loophole you use with the church, not with your doctor, and I can't stop laughing. I worked in a pharmacy and we noticed that a 16-year-old girl was coming back in to pick up her birth control exactly 2 weeks early every month. This was immediately flagged as strange because BC comes in a convenient package that makes it easy to keep track of the daily dose and birth control. It's not really a drug that people hustle to try to get as many pills as they can. Like Xanax, say. After a few months of this, the pharmacist confronted her and learned that every day she took her pill and her boyfriend did too. After Googling what happens when men take birth control, I'm morbidly curious as to how many months this happened for, because the boyfriend in question was probably undergoing some interesting changes as a result. When my wife was delivering our third child, a VBAC, I asked the doctor as a joke, "Can I be the one who chews the umbilical cord in half?" And he looked at me with a distant look and said, "Yeah, I guess." After several complications and several hours, a beautiful girl was in the world and the doctor said, "Okay, Daddy, get down on the floor and chew this cord in two if you're ready." Yeah, I didn't do it. I'm a nurse and helped deliver this girl's first baby. I was still in school at the time. She was like 19, I think. The father, who was obviously much older, was also in the room. After the baby was born, everyone was all excited and emotional, except for the father, who was just like, and shrugged it off. I worked in a diagnostic center. The gynecologist refers a patient for a hoo-ha ultrasound to find out why she's having fertility issues. The techie inserts the probe, woman flinches in pain, the tech asks if it hurts during adult fun times. The woman explains her husband doesn't insert it into the hoo-ha. No, here, while pointing to her belly button. The tech came out red-faced. She had to call the doctor and explain why the patient was having trouble getting pregnant. This happened twice at this clinic. Twice. ER nurse here had a 19-year-old woman come in for abdominal pain. She had 2 kids and was pregnant again. She said she was not happy to be pregnant again, but she didn't want to break up with her boyfriend. I thought the boyfriend may have been abusive or not letting her use birth control or something, so I closed the door and asked her some questions. Turns out she didn't know that banging caused babies. Her life skills class consisted of get boyfriend/married and the babies arrive, with no other details, so she thought once you had a boyfriend, babies were automatic and doing the deed was just a fun thing to do. We had a long talk. I'm not an OB, but work at an L&D hospital. In a note for our patient, there was one from a previous office visit that said, "Chief complaint, husband concerned about wife's weight gain during pregnancy." She was actually under the weight she needed to be at during that time. Seeing Mum back in the office for her 2-week follow-up after delivery to remove stitches. She had a tear that needed repair, only to find out that the stitches were gone. Turns out hubby took them out because they were bothering him when they were getting intimate. My mother is an OB Jin. She did a manual hoo-ha exam for a woman, and the husband asked her with an angry tone of voice if there was any other way of doing the exam besides her using her fingers, because he didn't like her putting fingers in his wife. Not an OB, but when I was in med school, I was seeing a pregnant teen who was convinced she couldn't be pregnant. I asked if she was getting intimate with anyone, and she said yes. I asked if she used any kind of contraception, and she said no. However, she said that her boyfriend told her he couldn't get pregnant because he got kicked in the balls. A lot. Not an OB, but I work in an ER, and we had a 22-year-old woman come in a while back. I asked her what she was there for, and she said, "I found a hole." Like an abscess? I found a hole. Okay, is it a wound? Does it hurt? No, it's just a hole. It's a black hole. I 100% didn't understand what she was talking about and knew that I wouldn't get any more info from her at the check-in desk, so I gave her the bracelet and sent her to the triage nurse who had the same conversation with her. She didn't specify anything beyond, "Look, it's just a hole." It was her hoo-ha. I can't… What? 22? How? How did this person get this far? There are so many things that should have happened in her life to enlighten her as to the nature of her anatomy. My goodness. Growing up, my mother was very strict and religious, and girls were forbidden from looking or talking about down there. Could be a similar situation? I was working with a girl who hadn't been married very long, and who hadn't had a period since the one right before her wedding. She had told her older sister, and she had told her she needed to find out if she was pregnant. So she went to the doc, and it was confirmed that she was. She pulls me in the back room so no one else can hear, and she tells me, and I tell her congratulations. She says she has a question for me. She's peeing just fine now, but how will she pee when the baby gets bigger? Won't it block the urine? We worked in a library. I went right out to the stacks and got her a book on anatomy and another on pregnancy. I found the pages on the genitourinary system, and we sat in the break room while I read the one for females with her and explained it like it was a storybook. I was so furious that no one had told her a damned thing. On my OB rotation, husband said, "Holy crap," as the baby crowned, vagaled, passed out, and hit his head on the bedside table on his way down, and had to be admitted to the same hospital his wife was having the baby at. She ended up getting discharged before he did. I definitely gave a story to the nurse who was taking care of my wife and I after our second kid. Having been going through labor all day, only being on liquids, and not giving birth till almost 9 at night, we were relaxing, relative term, with the nurse holding the baby when I turned to ask the nurse a question. She pauses, turns away, turns back to me, and responds with, "Not anytime soon." Disappointed, I tried to ask for more specifics, because I'd casually asked, "When can my wife have snacks?" And that was a pretty nondescript answer for someone who hadn't eaten in 12 hours. Turns out she thought I was asking when my wife and I can have adult fun times together again. After a good laugh, the correct answer was a couple of hours. I can't imagine what was going through her head before the clarification. Work in IM, but a patient's partner not wanting us to reveal an HIV diagnosis to a patient was definitely a low point for me, though where I work it's probably a stretch to even call that surprising. Back in my ER days, a young teenage patient came in with pregnancy-type symptoms. Of course, pregnancy test was positive, and appeared utterly shocked she was pregnant. I asked her if she was intimate with a partner. Yes. Do you use protection? No. Because? No. She still seemed surprised this had happened to her. Mom is an ob-gyn. She called a patient over to tell us she was HIV positive. The patient said, "I knew it," to which my mom asked how and why. Turns out the husband had been HIV positive for years, and they'd decided never to speak about it and have unprotected fun times for 5 years. This is what it costs to shirk responsibility and look the other way. In other words, idiot tax. Last month, a dad asked one of our OBs for an extra stitch during his wife's repair after delivery. Her immediate response was, "Exactly how small do you need it to be, sir?" Fricking legend on our unit now. Spread this so it can become the standard response to this all-too-common statement. I'm not an OB or gyn, however I am a flight medic who has delivered 3 babies. I'll never forget any of them. The second baby I delivered was about 5 weeks early, roadside, in East Jesus nowhere. The family had gone camping in the desert and Mum went into labor. By the time we arrived, there was no turning back and baby's head was visible. Mum was sort of squatting with her forearms on the middle row of seats in a van and her booty was aimed out the door. She was clothed in a loose dress. Just as she was pushing the head out, Dad said, "Wait, we might get blood on the floor." Mum rounded on him with the biggest death glare and said, "Frick your mum's van." That became a unit motto. Yeah, frick your mum's van, silly dude. Your wife is delivering your baby. If your mum asks you to reupholster her vehicle hot on the heels of this, she's officially a few Fruit Loops short of a bowl. Sister is a nurse in the mum/baby unit who will also work in labor and delivery. One dad asked for a C-section so her hoo-ha wouldn't be ruined. Another dad asking for her to be stitched up extra tight after the delivery. Another dad that couldn't seem to keep his clothes on during their entire stay. The nurses had to have multiple conversations with him to keep his clothes on. He just kept stripping and walking around, like he'd go out to the coffee station in the hall with only his tidy-whities on, and he'd be buck nude in the hospital room. We had to ask him to wear pants and a shirt when in the hall, and at minimum pants in the hospital room. No, he wasn't even trying to do the deed with her. Not a physician, but I do work in obstetrics. We had a code OB called on the overhead, which means a delivery is happening elsewhere in the hospital, and the team needs to get there stat. A woman's husband was worried about getting a parking ticket, so figured he would park in one of the massive parking garages and then walk up to the door as she's literally giving birth. They obviously didn't make it, and she delivered in the car. They were extremely religious, and to prevent her body from being exposed to what could potentially be a male doctor, they kept her pants on the whole time. Baby, placenta, and all were just chilling in this woman's pants. It was horrifying. Baby and mum were okay in the end. Dad is a 30-plus year OB and gynecologist, now retired. He tells a story of a hyper-religious couple, Muslim, who came in about difficulty getting pregnant. He examined the woman alone and discovered that she was actually an intersex person. Male gonads, undistended, no uterus, normal hoo-ha. The woman was mortified to learn this at 18. She feared her husband would be violent, believing he had been being gay by doing the deed with her. My dad gave her the option to call the police or ask for help. He and the nurses gave her phone numbers for counseling and offered discretion when talking to the spouse. She declined everything and asked that they tell the husband together. The man was super upset and they eventually left the office both in tears. Dad never saw her again and wonders what happened. Multiple people are asking the question, how did she not recognize something was wrong when she missed her period for multiple years? I'd asked this question myself to my dad as well. The answer, if I recall correctly, was that she did experience mild and intermittent menstruation-like symptoms, cramps, bleeding, etc., but they were very far apart and in hindsight completely unrelated to actual menstruation. She was from a rural community and never sought medical attention due to, who knows, money, fear, and the fact that she was otherwise completely healthy, I presume. I remember him saying that the marriage was arranged, and I'm sure her side of the fam were probably apprehensive about fertility issues. These are tricky situations. My grandpa was a surgeon, private practice, and in the army. Toward the end of his life, we discussed some of the crazy things he did and saw. He told me he operated on a man with 2 tumors in his abdomen. Turned out to be fully developed ovaries. He had fully functioning gonads, no hoo-ha or tubes, etc. Grandpa told him the tumors were successfully removed. The human body is a crazy thing. Back in my OB rotation in med school, we had a pregnant woman who was super morbidly obese with a BMI in the 70s. During her prenatal visit, the resident was asking about her pregnancy history, past difficulty with fertility and conception, problems with the pregnancy so far, etc. Pretty standard stuff as I understand at the time. Husband then chimed in about the conception. Turns out they had no trouble conceiving. He then went into detail about how the conception went and blew my little inexperienced mind. Basically, the wife's mother and sister had to help with the conception by holding the wife's thighs out of the way enough so that he could get in to do the job. I still don't have words. Not anything a husband or boyfriend said, but still an interesting story. I once took care of a patient who had a baby as a virgin. She was a very religious woman who was saving her virginity for marriage. She told me she never met the right man and she was ready to have the baby as she was getting older. She was in her early 40s, so she had the IVF done and had a baby while also being a virgin. Not an OB-GYN, but a med student. In one of my rotations, I had an encounter with a father who wanted us to make his wife only reproduce male children by some drugs or procedure. Our head used to tell us that I can tell if it's a boy or girl by only seeing the expressions of the fathers and relatives in the clinical rounds. You're allowed to guess, my country. I missed 2 minutes ago when I didn't know any of this. Me too, anonymous Reddit user. Me too. Although I'm glad to say that none of these medical facts have been a revelation to me, there have been some stories that have been uncomfortable for yours truly to read out loud. My dad is a doctor and his friend was an OB-GYN and was telling my dad a time when a couple came into his office and they were having difficulty having a child. They were trying for over a year to have a child, but the wife never got pregnant. Found out that the man and the woman came up in a very strict upbringing and the man was never putting his eggplant inside of her. He was basically rubbing his eggplant on top of her hoo-ha and would splooge across her belly. Then he would take his finger and smear his semen all over the top of her hoo-ha. My dad's friend had to explain how to do the deed to both of them and tell them what to do and how to do it. It was an awkward conversation. I just kept thinking, did they not ever watch adult flicks or have that talk with their parents? Have they never even seen stuff related to doing the deed ever? It was just a crazy story and I wonder if they ever figured it out and actually eventually had kids or not. My friend told me that her OB-GYN friend told her that apparently a significant number of people try to get pregnant by doing it in the butt. Proper education on these things matters, people. Years ago, I knew a woman that wanted to get pregnant, but that wasn't happening. She told me that one problem was her husband insisting on turning her around at the end and finishing in her butt. Now, she knew that wasn't good for conception, but he didn't, and she couldn't explain it to him in a way that worked. Perhaps I'm just being naive, but things like this make me wonder if he really knew or was playing dumb with his wife so he didn't have to have kids. My doctor told me a story about a baby he delivered. It was the couple's 6th, and they were very observant Orthodox Jews, so when she called at 11 p.m. on Shabbat that labor had started, the husband couldn't drive them to the hospital himself. Although the doctor understood, he tried to help them understand how emergent the situation was because the delivery was going to be so fast. The doctor races to the hospital and waits. He waits 30 minutes. An hour. He's pacing the drop-off. Finally, 90 minutes later, a taxi screeches into the parking lot at 2 a.m. The doctor opens her door to see a baby crowning and the woman yelling and the driver yelling. The husband throws open his door and just sprints off into the parking lot yelling, does a full loop while the baby is born, and runs up as the nurses are wrapping the baby and getting mum and baby into a wheelchair. The doctor said, "What happened? Where did you go?" The dad, I just didn't know what to do." The poor guy was so hopped up on adrenaline that he just took off. Not a mind-blowing thing that was said, but still kind of funny. When I was in medical school, I did my OB rotation on high-risk areas. Medical students were generally scared of these areas, so I was the only student with an awesome attending physician and got to do a lot. We called the attending on this service a random thought generator. If he thought something, he would say or act on it. We had one student that showed up on our service in active labor. She had had a very uneventful pregnancy and couldn't figure out why she was on our service, but hey, we'll take a normal patient. She arrived with perfect makeup, perfect hair, and she had the perfect epidural and was in no pain or distress. The attending looked at me and said that I'd be doing this delivery. Okay, I thought, no problem. Then he looked at the father and said, "No, you'll deliver this one." The father got wide-eyed and the mother started laughing. "He's an air traffic controller. I've never seen him panic before." The nurse took him to the sink, gave him a scrub brush, and had him start washing his hands. We turned back to the mum. "Okay, push. 1, 2, 3, 10, relax." We looked at the dad and he's still washing that same finger he started with. Okay, that's good enough. A delivery is by no means sterile. Put this and this and this on. Our attending didn't put women in stirrups, but would instead deliver straight onto the bed. He sat the dad on the bed with him on one side and me on the other, and the dad delivered his own healthy child. My mum taught labor and delivery. If the baby won't fit, it's too late for a C-section, so you break up the baby's shoulder so it can fit through. One of her students asked why they don't break the mum's hip instead. Not a doctor, but pregnant. I told my boyfriend we should make and freeze 1 to 2 months of meals before the birth, because we'd be too tired to cook. He looked at me knowingly and said, "Ah yes, like pureed fruits and vegetables, so we don't have to mash them ourselves." He literally thought you feed the baby food from day one. We're in our 30s, college-educated, he has a huge, close extended family with lots of babies, and he knows I'm going to breastfeed. I guess he thought you do them both from day one? My ex-boyfriend is an OB-GYN. He got annoyed with me when I was having cramps and said because he was an OB-GYN, he knew exactly what pain felt like and told me to get over it. Should have seen that as the first of many red flags. Obligatory, not an OB-GYN, but an operating room nurse. One gynecologist told us once about their gynecologist in training. We all knew him. He was a young, friendly, and good guy to work with. He was already married, father of 2 kids at the age of 25. This guy only had one negative aspect, and it was affecting his work dearly. He was extremely religious. This doesn't have to be negative, but his decision-making was based on his religion, and he often refused to offer contraceptives to his female patients, and he was reserved talking and explaining contraception methods to couples. It was against his religion. Eventually word got around with his superiors and they had to sit him down, explaining with him it's against the law to withhold any form of help and information. I was a receptionist and this woman came in crying. Her husband was behind her and she said, "Help, I'm bleeding." Long story short, we found out she was actively miscarrying in the lobby. She went to the back room for emergent care while a surgical room was prepped and she was, of course, crying and moaning and seemed to be in immense pain. The husband was stoic the whole time, nonplussed, not bothered in the least. He frowned at her moaning and said, "Will you knock it off? You're embarrassing me." He even had the nerve to ask us to watch his daughter in our break room while he went for a smoke. Had to have an emergency C-section and my husband was in there watching the whole thing over the sheet. After the baby was born, the doctor removed the placenta and my husband asked, "What is that?" Without missing a beat, the doctor turns to the second doctor assisting, holds it up and says, "I don't know. What is this?" All I could see at this point was my husband's face, and it was so worth it. What are your funniest not safe for work jokes? Well, folks, in case it's not obvious, there has had to be a fair bit of swapping out some words for more YouTube-safe alternatives. I think the jokes still work out just fine, though. A mother, father, and 6-year-old son go to a zoo, where they stop to see the elephant. While the father's in the bathroom, the son notices one elephant has a rather large member. Curious, he gets his mum's attention. "Mommy, what's that hanging from the elephant?" "Oh, that's the trunk, honey." "No, further back." "Oh, you mean its tail?" "No, between its legs. That. What is that?" The mother goes red. "Oh, that's nothing, honey." The father returns and the mother goes off to use the bathroom. Still curious, the son asks his dad, "Daddy, what's that hanging from the elephant?" "His trunk, son." "No, further back." "You mean his tail?" "No, that thing, between his legs." "Oh, that. Well, that's the elephant's wang." "Oh, why did Mummy say it was nothing?" "Son, I have spoiled that woman." This one always gets a laugh on construction sites. Little Tommy was about 5 years old. One day he was being a bit of a handful and annoying his mother. His mother said to him, "Timmy, why don't you go across the street and watch the builders work for a while?" Timmy returned home a few hours later and his mother asked him, "Timmy, what did you learn from watching the builders work?" Timmy replied, "Well, first you put the goddamned door up, then the mother fricker doesn't fit, so you have to take that son of a witch back down. Then you have to shave 2 C-word hairs off each side, and then you have to put that wang-sucking door back up." Timmy's mother was gobstruck, and all she could say was, "Just wait until your father gets home." A couple of hours later, Timmy's father gets home. Timmy's mother tells Timmy to tell his father what he'd learned. Timmy repeats what he's learned. "Well, first you put the goddamn door up, then the mother fricker doesn't fit, so you have to take that son of a witch back down. Then you have to shave 2 C-word hairs off each side, and then you have to put that clock-sucking door back up." Timmy's father looked at Timmy with a look of anger and disappointment and said, "Timmy, go outside right now and fetch me a switch." Timmy replied, "Frick you, that's the electrician's job." 3 men got stranded on a desert island. After walking around for a while, they're found by some tribesmen. The natives take them back to their hut. The chief tells them, "Go out into the jungle and collect 10 pieces of fruit." The first guy returns with 10 apples and the chief says, "Now, shove them all up your butt without showing any emotion or we'll kill you." He shoves the first up and is in terrible pain but shows no emotion, but during the process of pushing up the second, he flinches and therefore gets killed. The second guy comes back with 10 cherries and gets told to do the same. He's finding it relatively easy, but when he gets to the 8th, he starts laughing hysterically and gets shot. He meets the first guy in the afterlife, and the guy asks, "Why did you do that? Why did you laugh?" And the second guy replies, "Well, I'd nearly finished when I saw the next guy walking up with 10 pineapples." An Aussie is on holiday driving through New Zealand when he spots a bloke in a paddock doing the deed with a sheep. The Aussie pulls his car over and yells out to the Kiwi fella, "Mate, in Australia we shear those." The Kiwi turns and yells back, "I'm not shearing this one, bro. You can get your own frickin' one." Honestly, you would be surprised at how many jokes in this thread just seem to be the Kiwis and Aussies slandering each other. I might try to spread out those jokes a little bit. A man buys a pack of prophylactics at the pharmacy. The pharmacist says, "Large pack, huh?" The guy buying says,
Yeah, I'm meeting my girlfriend's parents tonight. After dinner, when we go home, we'll be getting it on.
Later at the dinner, the guy is praying before he eats his food. His girlfriend says,
I didn't know you were religious.
The guy replies, I didn't know your dad was a pharmacist. A ventriloquist is going for a walk through the countryside. It's a hot day and the sun is beating down on him, and he's getting tired and needs a break when he spots a farmhouse. The old farmer that lives there is sitting on his porch in a rocking chair, so the ventriloquist walks up and asks if he can have a glass of water and a shady spot to sit for a bit. The farmer misses having company, so him and the ventriloquist begin chatting while the ventriloquist rests. Now, this ventriloquist has a mischievous side and comes up with an idea. He asks the farmer, I see you have this big farm here. Can I see some of the animals? And the farmer gladly brings him around to the barn. First, they see a pig, and the ventriloquist walks up to it and says, Hello there, Mr. Pig. How's life on the farm? Then, using his skills as a ventriloquist, he makes it seem as though the pig replies to him by saying,
I love it here. I've got plenty of food and plenty of mud to roll around in.
The farmer nearly falls over in shock, exclaiming,
Oh my stars, it can talk!
The ventriloquist nods seriously and asks what other animals he has. So the farmer brings him over to an old horse. The ventriloquist asks, Hello, Mrs. Horse. How are you on this fine day? To which the horse appears to reply, Another beautiful day out here in the countryside. Plenty of room to graze in, clean water to drink, and clean hay to sleep on. Again, the farmer can't believe what he's seeing.
All this time and I never knew they could talk, he says.
Then the ventriloquist spots some sheep in a pen nearby and says, Hey, do you mind if I say hello to the sheep? The farmer's face goes bright red and shouts,
Don't you talk to those sheep! They're liars! Everyone knows those sheep are damn liars!
A guy and a girl meet up in a hospital elevator. The girl says,
I'm here to give blood. They give me $10 every time I give blood. What are you here for?
The man says, I'm here to donate semen. They give me $50 every time I donate. They go their separate ways until a week later when the man sees the girl rushing for the elevator. He holds the door open for her until she gets in. Here to donate blood again? He asks. She shakes her head. Father comes home and little Johnny comes running in tears.
Dad, Sparky died. I came home and he was lying on his back with his feet in the air.
Dad tries to find the right words, eventually explains, Sparky is reaching up so Jesus can reach down and take him to heaven. Johnny mulls this over. It makes sense and he feels better. Weeks later, Johnny comes running out in a state of panic.
Dad, Mommy almost died today.
Oh my God, what happened?
I came home early from school and heard moaning. Mommy was on her back with her feet in the air, screaming, Jesus, I'm coming! And if it wasn't for Uncle Bobby holding her down, we would have lost her for sure.
An old man is sitting on his porch and he sees a kid walking by carrying a roll of duct tape. Old guy yells out,
Hey kid, where are you going with that duct tape?
Gonna catch me some ducks,
says the kid.
What? You can't catch ducks with duct tape, he yells back,
but the kid continues on his way. A couple of hours later, the kid is walking back the other way, carrying 4 ducks wrapped in duct tape. The old man can't believe it. The next day, the old guy is sitting on his porch again, and he sees the kid walking by. This time, he's got a roll of chicken wire under his arm. The old guy yells out,
Hey kid, where are you going with that chicken wire?
Gonna catch me some chickens,
says the kid.
Seriously? You can't catch chickens with chicken wire,
he yells back, but once again, the kid just continues on his way. Later that day, the kid walks back the other way and sure enough, he's got half a dozen chickens wrapped up in the chicken wire. The old guy is astounded. Next day, once again, the old guy is sitting out on his porch and he sees the kid walking in front of his house. He yells out,
Hey kid, what you got under your arm there?
Pussy willow,
says the kid.
Hang on, I'll go get my hat.
An Australian is in New Zealand working on a sheep farm with a bunch of Kiwis. After a couple of weeks, he goes to one of them and says,
Hey mate, where are all the girls at? I haven't been laid in ages.
The Kiwi says, Nearest girl is 3 hours away. What we do here when we get in the mood is head down to the paddock, pick us out a sheep, and give it a good rooting. The Aussie is naturally disgusted, but as the weeks go by, he grows more and more desperate. Finally, he sneaks down to a secluded paddock, creeps up on a sheep, drops trow, and starts going to town. Almost immediately, he hears all the other farmhands laughing at him. Trying to quickly pull his pants back up, he yells,
I thought all you guys did it.
We do, replied one of the Kiwis, but you picked the ugly one. Well, I told you there'd be a few of these, didn't I? These two countries really have an axe to grind with each other, it seems. My girlfriend tried to make me do the deed with her on the hood of her Honda Civic. I refused. If I'm going to do it on a Honda, it's going to be on my own accord. What's the difference between a pickpocket and a peeping Tom? A pickpocket snatches watches. Kinda like the difference between a magic show and a burlesque show. What's the difference? Well, a magic show is a cunning array of stunts. How about the difference between an epileptic cornhusker and a working girl with diarrhea? Alright, what's the difference? An epileptic cornhusker shucks between fits. Man walks by a shop. There's a sign out front that says, cheese sandwiches $1, pull jobs $5. So he walks in and sees a beautiful blonde standing behind the counter. Are you the woman who gives pull jobs? She says, why yes I am, in a very flirty tone. He says, well, wash them hands and make me a cheese sandwich. This is my go-to joke. Gets a laugh every time. There's a bar right outside the town I live in that's a hot spot for people driving through town. One night, this guy walks in and sees a jar full of $10, $20, $50, and even a couple of $100 bills in there. So he asks the bartender, how does somebody win that tip jar? The bartender says, that's for anyone who can make the horse in the back laugh. So he strolls to the back where the horse is, closes the door, and a couple of minutes later, he walks out and the horse is laughing uncontrollably. He casually takes the tip jar on his way out. A couple of months later, he enters the same bar and sees an even bigger jar full of cash. So he asks the bartender how to win this one. That's for anyone who can make the horse stop laughing. The man gets up, walks to the back, and sure enough, a couple of minutes later he walks out, and the horse is dead silent. The man grabs the tip jar and is walking away, and the bartender says, hey, wait, I gotta know, how did you do it? The man says, well, the first time I told him my wang was bigger than his, and the second time I showed him. 3 men are at the gates of heaven. St. Peter says, heaven is a big place. You'll need a vehicle to get around. You'll get one based on how faithful you were to your partner. The first man says, in our decades of marriage, never once was I even attracted to another woman. I was only faithful to my wife. St. Peter gives him a Rolls Royce. The second man says, well, sometimes I had a few one-night stands, but I still loved my wife, and I never lapsed any time else. St. Peter gives him a moderately expensive car. The third man says, I'm sorry to say this, but I was incredibly unfaithful. I had affairs every week. He gets a bicycle. The 3 men meet a few minutes later. The first guy is crying. The second man asks, why are you crying? You have a Rolls Royce. And the first guy says, well, I just saw my wife riding by on a skateboard. A man goes to a brothel. The madam welcomes him and says that there's currently a lot of free women and he can do the deed with all of them. The man is very happy with the suggestion and takes the deal. The next day, after such a steamy night, he decides to go back. The madam welcomes him and says that right now only 1 girl is available. Well, the man was a little upset, but it's better than nothing. After another happy night, he decided to come back again. The madam welcomes him yet again and says, oh, sorry, we have no one available right now. The man is clearly upset and keeps asking, maybe he could wait. The madam says, well, there is one unpopular choice. You can do it with a badger. Since the man is really feeling the need, he decides why the hell not and took the deal and did the deed with the badger. As a loyal client, he decided to come back tomorrow. The madam welcomes the man but says, oh, sorry, there are no girls available. The customer got upset. But hey, what about the badger? The madam says, sorry, even he is taken, but the brothel is introducing a new activity. Watch from the two-way mirror how other clients do the deed with the ladies. The man agrees to try it out. In the room, there are many spectators, and the couple being watched are going really rough and hard. The man pokes another client and says, hey, look, what a show. The fellow man smiles and replies, that's nothing. You should have seen the guy the other night doing it with a badger. Somehow I get the feeling that even if I'm not specifically using the naughty words, that this video might get demonetized anyway? Let's test it out, I guess. A young Greek couple are about to get married, and before the nuptials, the young woman's mother pulls her aside for a quick chat. And Greek men are known to prefer making love in a very specific way. So at some point, he may ask you to turn around. Now, I want you to know that it's okay to say no if you don't want to do it that way. The wedding day comes and goes, and there's no turnaround request from her husband. No request on the honeymoon, nor through their first year. No special request for their first anniversary or their second. Halfway through their 3rd year, her husband says, you know, if you want, you can turn around and we can try this a different way. The woman says, no, my mother warned me that this day might come and she told me I'd never have to do that if I don't want to. The husband replies, That's fine with me, but I thought you wanted kids one day. A man is leaving town for a business trip. Knowing he'll be gone for a few weeks, he decides to treat his wife to a new adult toy to keep her satisfied until he returns. However, looking around the local shop, he doesn't see anything that he thinks she'll like. At that point, the shop owner approaches and says,
"If you're having trouble deciding, may I show you one of our special items?"
"Sure," says the man thankfully. The owner takes out a box from behind the desk labeled Voodoo Wang and explains that it'll fit any hole and do anything you need it to using voodoo magic. The man is skeptical, so he asks for a demonstration. Happy to oblige, the owner says, "Voodoo Wang, my hand." At once, the previously inanimate object springs to life and starts moving back and forth in the owner's hand as if he were giving it a pull job. "Voodoo Wang, the door," he continues and points to the entrance. The magic toy flies to the door, shrinks to the size of the door's keyhole, and starts going to town. "Now," cautions the owner, "this is the important part. Once it starts, it won't stop until it hears, 'Voodoo Wang, your box.'" On cue, the Voodoo Wang leaves the door, changes back to its normal size, and returns, dormant, to the box. The man is thrilled with his find and buys it for his wife. When it comes time for him to leave, he gives her the new toy and demonstrates how it works like the shop owner did. The wife, very excited about the new toy, thanks her husband and wishes him well on the trip. About a week passes and the wife decides to try out the Voodoo Wang. Removing it from the box, she says, "Voodoo Wang, my hoo-ha." Well, the Wang doesn't hesitate. Jumping out of the box, it changes size to perfectly fit the woman's body and goes to town. It's fantastic. It does everything she wants it to and knows exactly when to speed up, slow down, get rough, be gentle, you name it. After her second climax, the woman says, "Voodoo Wang, stop!" But nothing happens. Again, she says, "Voodoo Wang, stop!" But still nothing happens. Realizing she forgot the magic phrase, she starts to panic. Grabbing some clothes and her car keys, she makes a mad dash to the hospital to see if they can help her. She's about halfway there when she has a third, massive, full-bodied climax and starts losing control of the car. At this point, a cop sees her driving erratically and pulls her over. "Ma'am, you're driving very recklessly. Care to explain yourself?" Well, she does her best to explain the Voodoo Wang to the police officer, but he's clearly not buying it. "It's the truth," she pleads shakily. "Yeah, right," scoffs the cop. "Voodoo Wang, my butt." Bill worked in a pickle factory. He had been employed there for a number of years when he came home one day to confess to his wife that he had a terrible compulsion. He had an urge to stick his pickle into the pickle slicer. His wife suggested that he should see some kind of therapist to talk about it, but Bill indicated he'd be too embarrassed. He vowed to overcome the compulsion on his own. One day, a few weeks later, Bill came home absolutely ashen. His wife could see at once that something was seriously wrong. "What's wrong, Bill?" she asked. "Do you remember that I told you I had this tremendous urge to put my wang into the pickle slicer?" "Oh, Bill, you didn't." "Yes, I did." "My God, Bill, what happened?" "I got fired." "No, Bill, I mean, what happened with the pickle slicer?" "Oh, she got fired too." A man is standing stark bare naked on a street corner. A cop walks up and tells him, "Sir, you can't be doing that here unless you have a good excuse. I'm going to take you to jail." "Yes, sir, I have a good excuse. I was at my girlfriend's apartment, we started drinking. Next thing you know, she jumps up and says, 'Let's take our clothes off and go to town.' I guess I beat her here." Two guys ring the bell of a brothel. The madam opens the door. "What do you want?" "What can we get for $5? "For $5, you can crank each other off in those bushes over there." She shuts the door. A few minutes later, the bell rings again. The madam opens the door and it's the same two guys. "So, who do we pay?" And now, ladies and gentlemen, some nun jokes for your enjoyment. Sister Claire and Sister Teresa are driving down a desert highway when the devil appears on their hood, making threatening gestures. "Quick," Sister Teresa says, "show him your cross." Sister Claire leans out the window, shouting, "Piss off, you wanghead! I'll kick you in the frickin' gonads if you try that crap again! Don't mess with me, you prick!" Two young nuns are asked by their Mother Superior to paint a room in their convent, and are sternly warned not to get paint on their habits. To ensure they comply with Mother Superior's order, they decide to remove their clothing and paint in the buck, as the only eyes that will see them will be each other's and those of God. After painting for over an hour, there's a knock at the door. Panicking, the first nun asks, "Who's at the door?" A reply comes in, "It's the blind man. May I come in?" The nuns look at each other, neither wishes to turn away the blind man. The second nun says,
"If the man is blind, he won't see our exposed bodies. We should let him in."
The first nun agrees and opens the door to the man. "Nice hooters. Now, where do you want these blinds?" A young man walks up and sits down at the bar. "What can I get you?" the bartender inquires.
"I want 6 shots of Jägermeister," responded the young man.
6 shots? Are you celebrating something?"
"Yeah, my first go at oral."
"Well, in that case, let me give you a 7th on the house."
"No offense, sir, but if 6 shots won't get rid of the taste, nothing will."
A cop is eating lunch at a diner when he overhears an elderly couple, maybe in their 80s, talking. The man says, "Do you remember this place?" The woman answers,
"Of course. Behind this diner is where we first did the deed."
The man says, "What do you say we do it again?" The woman giggles and says,
"Why not?"
And they both get up to leave. The cop was taken aback by this and was curious, so he decided to follow them. He follows them as they slowly walk behind the diner. When they go behind the diner, he decides he will just stay there to make sure no one bothers them. He then watches as the lady slowly lifts her dress and the man grabs his pants. The man grabs the fence in front of him and starts going at it full force, like a stallion with his first mare. The cops were taken aback. This guy seemed to have more stamina than anyone in the world. When they were done, the couple starts walking out of the alley and the cop decides to talk to the man. He had to know how he was able to do that. The cop said, "How are you able to keep going like that, even at your age?" The man smiled and answered, "Well, for starters, 60 years ago, that fence wasn't electric." A man moves into a new town and wants to make friends. He goes to the local bar and orders a drink. The bartender says, "Hey, you're new. You want to try out our bar challenge for new guys?" The man says, "Let me hear it." The bartender then goes and says, "Well, first you need to drink this whole bottle of Patron without stopping. Then you have to juggle these 10 beer bottles. After that, there's a gator outside with a loose tooth. Then there's my poor old sister upstairs that's never had a climax in her life." The man says, "F that, I'm not doing that." But after a few beers, he says, "Give me that Patron," with fire in his eyes. He chugs the Patron, no problem. He juggles the beer bottles with no problem. Then he goes outside to the gator. The occupants then hear the gator roar and scratch the man. They hear groans and moans from the man. Then they hear silence. The man comes back to the bar, still adjusting his pants, and says, "Okay, now where's that woman with the loose tooth?"
Cops of Reddit. What criminal actually fascinated you with their criminal skills? Continually had to interview a man who was repeatedly arrested for running guns. Sometime about my 4th interview with the guy, he explained to me that he earns about $250,000 in 3 months of smuggling them. He inevitably gets caught and was repeatedly sentenced to 9-month stints, 2 years but only served 9 months. He also told me that no one ever seized his funds. They were all done in cash and left in a, quote, safe place. So he said he had a steady job where he made $250,000 for a year's worth of work and would retire in a few more years. Plus, since it was all tax-free and he lived cost-free for his 9 months of incarceration, he was banking it all. Dude basically made my entire life's earnings in 7 or so years, but the guys arresting him thought he was an idiot. Edit, holy crap, this blew up. I'm currently at work and won't get into too much detail. This is a 100% true story and feel many don't understand that 3 strikes is a commonly misunderstood law. The defendant must have been prior sentenced to serious or violent felonies. This isn't generally, depending on the gumption of the DA, applicable. Most cases get pled out to more minor offenses in sentencing. This man never took it to the box. Unless they have done what we call the Dirty 30, they will usually be eligible for a plea if the strike is dropped. I am not a beat cop, nor was I a beat cop when I met this guy. I was not seeking any charges against him, merely a cog in the bigger wheel. We don't often catch the smart ones. They live in mansions in Bogota. We catch the low-hanging idiot fruit, but sometimes the idiot fruit can become useful. There are many dynamics to law enforcement beyond someone's mail getting stolen and domestic violence calls. I've met way more impressive people, but this guy fit the question asked. Back in an earlier part of life, when I was a cop in Baltimore's Western District, our sector had been getting hit with weird commercial burglaries that owners couldn't figure out how they were happening. Alarms weren't going off, and owners were showing up to ransack shops. We drove a lot of back alleys and walked a lot of foot for months trying to catch this guy. Eventually, one winter midnight shift, we caught up to him. He finally hit a place that had motion alarms as well as entry alarms and triggered it. It was about 3 a.m. and had been snowing lightly for a couple of hours. We got to the place in less than a minute, and the cop who took the back alley saw this dude running down the alley with about a half a block head start. He took after him, radioed, and we all started converging. By the time we all got back there and had closed off the ends of the alleys in the block, nobody could find this guy anywhere. That's okay, it was snowing. We're walking along, following tracks in the snow in the alley, and they turn into a side alley and stop at the dead end. We looked at each other confused and start shining flashlights around. My side partner says, "Mother freaking Spider-Man." We look, and he's got the guy in his light, about 15 feet up against the buildings. He had wedged himself into the corner of two buildings and pressed his arms/hands and legs and feet out against the two walls and used isometric pressure at that 90-degree angle to lift himself up and stay wedged up there, just looking down at us, like some free-climbing mountaineer. He came down and got locked up. After interviewing him, over the course of days and weeks, a bunch of us went back to old burglary locations from the past few months and found where he had gotten in through roof access points. Dude was wiry and strong as heck. Skittered up the sides of buildings in that same isometric counterpressure kind of way if you couldn't find any easier access. Not a cop, but I remember a neighbor of mine having their bike, or was it barbecue, stolen, then returned the next day, along with an apology note stating that the thief had really needed it for the night, along with several apology tickets to a local sporting event, CFL football, for the family. When they went to the game, the thief and thieves came back and robbed the house. A guy in our local jail wanted to escape. Now, our jail is pretty much escape-proof if you're behind bars, but not so much if you are a trustee bringing food into the kitchen or going to court or going to the hospital, etc. So this guy went to the hospital for a problem, and halfway from the doctor's office to the car, there was a bathroom in the hallway. He told the guards he had to go, they escort him in, he pees, then back to jail. He tells this to his girlfriend. She dresses up as a dude, goes to that same bathroom, removes the hockey puck from the urinal and drops a hacksaw blade down the drain and attaches the blade by fishing wire back to the puck. Next time he goes to the hospital, he goes to that same urinal. The guards are standing right there, but there is a urinal screen, so it looks like he is shaking out the last drop, but in fact is reeling in the blade. Back to the jail. A hacksaw blade isn't enough to get through all the steel in the jail, but it is enough to make a hole in a window where he now went into the business of reeling drugs up from the ground with a fishing line. I had a guy that was IT for a mid-sized company. He set up fake vendor accounts that went to his Google Wallet. He then would make fake invoices for the fake company for software licenses, and the company would pay a monthly subscription fee, and the guy would pocket it. He never got caught. The scam snowballed to the point if he stopped, someone would notice. So he confessed to the CEO and had minimal prison time and had to pay it back. Remember, Brenda from accounting is going to pay whatever is on her desk. Edit. IT and accounting can get together and rob you blind. Keep Brenda and Jed away from each other. I worked in the jail for a short time before working patrol, and as such, I knew quite a few of her clients. A year or two into patrol, about 10 years ago, I'm walking to my car, which is parked on a city street after a call, and my keys are locked in the car. A client, who I remembered as always being rather funny, comes off his front porch, asks if I need help, and in less than 5 seconds, he had my door open in one movement. He and his friends, and I, just started laughing. I threw him a fist bump, and that was the end. Now, I have a whole kit to get into cars for emergencies like babies trapped inside. I've practiced and tried to be good with it. I've also called unknown amounts of tow trucks to help people. I've watched locksmiths work. Nobody held a candle to this guy. Side note, client really cleaned up his life and owns a small but decent mechanic shop now. It's pretty nice to see. My dad is a cop. He once had a guy run a red light at 2 a.m. The guy then stopped at the next light for about 3 minutes as it went through its cycles. My dad pulled him over and asked why he waited so long. The guy said since he ran the red light, he thought he should stop extra long at the next one. Edit. My dad also has a rule that says if you make him laugh, he won't give you a ticket. No ticket was issued that night. 2 local guys walked into Canadian Tire and just casually walked out of store with a full-size canoe. Who would ever question that bold move? Got caught when they went back in for the oars. I watched a Travel Channel program on casino thieves. One of the most successful was a sleight of hand guy at the roulette table. His gimmick was he'd put 2 chips on a roulette number. When he won, the dealer, spinner, I don't know, I'll just say dealer, looks at his 2 chips and says, okay, 20 times 35 is $700. No, the guy would say, and he'd flip over the top chip. It wasn't 2 $10 chips, it was a $10 chip on top of a $1,000 chip. The casino would call their pit bosses and their security team and analyze footage from a dozen different security cameras pointed at the table and the surrounding tables. All of them would show that the guy and everyone at the table never touched his chips. It was physically impossible for him to make a switch. What he did was sketchy, but it wasn't against the rules. Finally, reluctantly, they would give him his $35,350. Turns out he was switching chips. He had 2 people working with him to watch and distract the dealer and the pit boss. He was an expert at it. He would bet $1,010 every round and switch out the $1,000 chip every time he lost. He realized that casino security won't scrutinize every $20 loss. Not a cop, but I always liked this guy. Richard Lee McNair. Quote from the Wikipedia article. After McNair's arrest, he escaped 3 times from 3 different institutions using various creative methods. On his first attempt, he used lip balm to squeeze out of a pair of handcuffs. He escaped a second time by crawling through a ventilation duct. In his last escape from a federal prison in April 2006, he mailed himself out of prison in a crate. Not a cop, but look up the Banco Rio robbery in Argentina. That was some fine robbing. They enter the bank from the front door, everyone on the ground, demand the bank vault to be open. They get in and close the door. Police arrive and start to negotiate through telephone calls. Negotiation lasts for hours as they threaten to kill everyone in the bank. Police finally go in, enter the vault, and it was empty. No money, no people. An hour later, they find behind a cabinet a hole in the wall. The hole led to the sewage system that ended up straight to the river. They put a boat in the sewage and escaped through the river. They got caught because the wife of the gang leader turned him in because of a fight they had. The money never appeared. Have y'all seen that show called Money Heist? That's its English name. The Spanish name is Casa de Papel. I think this event is what inspired the show. It's about this group of criminals that all get together and rob a bank. But what sets it apart is that it goes into each person's life and drama unfolds as tensions and relationships form between all the characters. Highly recommend if you have Netflix. I had a shoplifter hitting the Walmart for TVs. He would go into the store, put a TV in the cart, and go to customer service. He would request a refund for the television. To wit, the customer service employee told him he needed a receipt. He would proceed to get agitated to the point where security would come over and escort him and the TV back to his car. Away he would go. He took 3 local Walmarts for almost 20 TVs. Sometimes, it's the simple strategy that's the best. My coworker back in the day used to work at a bank. He would copy checks and cash them. He was almost at $1 million when his girlfriend got mad at him and snitched. He would be sitting on a bench somewhere if it wasn't for her. Lesson, people. The only people that should know of your crime are the ones you commit it with. r/unethical life pro tips. Couple of idiots tried to steal an ATM, chained it up to the back of an old 1975 Chrysler New Yorker, weren't looking, and it rolled into a convenience store front window. Left the ATM, and as the alarms for the store were going off, made off with 50+ cartons of cigarettes. Got pulled over on a highway because one of them had to pee. Not a cop, but worked with police after I was mugged. Basically, this young, really sweet-looking couple would mug or pickpocket people, go to the bank of the victim, and one of them would claim that his/her wallet had been stolen, and they had no money to get a new ID and needed ID to get a bank card. The sympathetic banker would buy the story and help them get a new debit card under the victim's account. They were super charismatic and memorized all the other information they could find from the wallet: full name, address, sometimes actual numbers from the bank card. Apparently in my case, the guy showed up with my credit card saying he had canceled it by mistake as he thought it had been in his wallet when it was stolen. The banker gave him a new credit card and a debit card for my account. This happened to me 4 years ago, and they were still going strong this year. The only reason they were caught was because I happened to be at a bank, saw them pulling this crap, and recognized them from when they mugged me. It's not the crime of the century, but at the college I was a cop at, we had a phantom pooper. Somebody would, at night, take a dump on the floor next to the toilet. And we get a call about crap on the floor and basically be like, well, I'm not cleaning it up, call a janitor. Eventually, after it happened a few times, we started paperwork on it. I have no idea why. We were never going to catch the guy or girl. This went on for years. Not every night, not even every week, but often enough that I'd always get a chuckle out of it. Last time it happened was 3 days before my last day there, and I left satisfied that the mystery pooper was still hard at work. Edit. Lovely. My most upvoted comment is about poop now. I feel like I've accomplished something today. Edit number 2. It still happens. I keep in touch with coworkers, and they still find poop every once in a while. So, it didn't stop when I left. So no, it wasn't me.
I am the one who defecates in the night. I am the grunt in your stall, the splash in your toilet, the stench in your bathroom. I am the Phantom Pooper!
Ex-deputy sheriff here. Before I attended PED Academy and was able to become a road deputy, I worked corrections. One of the smartest people in that facility I've ever dealt with was a man on the second story of the tower I'll call Inmate X. X would spend most of his days in his cell, quote, asleep. He never went out in the pod, he never brought a lot of attention to himself. He just seemed like the typical guy who made an honest mistake and wanted to sleep his time away and go home. About a month after we received X, he had to elevate the security level of another inmate in his cell, 5 bunks per cell, 20 cells per pod, because we found metal in his rack. 2 more months go by, and X now has less than 90 days left of his initial 180-day sentence. Suddenly, an alert goes off in the pod. A deputy triggered his radio for backup when he went in the pod to find all but one of the 87 inmates high off their butts, having taken acid tabs smuggled in the jail in clear wrap. After we shook the pod down and searched for more, all we found was that inmate X was the only one who hadn't taken any drugs because he was asleep. He had established a pattern of this, so we believed him. 2 days later, another alert goes up. This time, everyone but X had taken some Molly and the pod broke out in a happy dance/cuddling frenzy. 3 days after that, the court sent us over a copy of their security footage. They're across the street from the jail. As we watch the highlighted segment, we see a red coupe pull up outside the jail, a white cloth falls from the second-story window, a woman exits the car, loads the cloth, and it's hoisted back up. This absolutely blew our minds. No way could it be possible, because the windows were reinforced glass and steel mesh surrounded by bars. But as we ran up to the second story, we inspected every window, couldn't find any traces of tampering. About a week passed, then the courts called over to us, the red coupe is back, and we all rushed to the pod to finally catch X out of bed, having skillfully removed the sealant in the window in a fashion where it wouldn't break, and was using a handmade system of his underwear and some string from his blanket to hoist the drugs up through the hole. That day, we busted him with cocaine rocks. The driver of the coupe turned out to be his girlfriend, and she was arrested. Our minds were blown at how clever he was to do it the way he did, right under our noses. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison, and his girlfriend received 25 years. 45 years? When he had 90 days left? The homies just wanted to cuddle, man. I'm not a police officer, apologies, but I will say, I once briefly had a coworker who was an accomplished con man. The guy lied about everything, constantly and convincingly, and was also stealing equipment. He was in the IT department, to sell. Eventually, though, people called BS on the lies that the owner realized this wasn't just standard griping, but that the guy was serious trouble. The guy fascinated me, though. So much lying, so much effort to present false images of himself, that he had a PhD, that he was a naval aviator, that he was a scuba diver. I did a bunch of searching for him online around the time he was fired and found threads in and online BMW enthusiast groups where he ran a big scam selling parts he never delivered, then made an appearance as his own twin brother to sell the story that he himself had been shot down over Iraq and therefore couldn't deliver the parts he'd been paid for. Anyway, it was just the weirdest thing to me. People I respect who worked directly with him said he actually had the knowledge and skills to do the job he was hired for, which was, I'm sure, a pretty good paying IT gig. But instead, he half-baked it and got busy stealing equipment. He was fired, then not long after arrested and sent to prison for selling prescriptions to people in his capacity as a fake MD. I had the discussion with a good friend who also worked there at the time. I'd argue, there has to be something really weird wrong with him, right? Something off with his brain or something? A mental illness, or something with drug and alcohol abuse? While my friend would say, no, he's just a piece of crap con man. There are people who do it for a living. They're out there. Anyway, sorry for butting into your thread, but this guy still fascinates me, though from a far distance. I worked at a radio station for a while, and the news reporter listened to the police scanner constantly. She told me to come into her office and listen to this chase going down. The cops were on a high-speed chase down back roads following a car thief. This guy was taking these curves and hills at 90, and it was a 5-speed sports car. But eventually, he took a sharp curve too fast and flipped the car multiple times into a field. He got out of the car completely unharmed and fled, stole another truck at a farm and drove it close to his home, walked to his house and went to bed. The police were shocked at how good of a driver he was, being that he was only 17. He was arrested, and in his mugshot, he had his collar popped up and this smirk on his face like, "I'm so freaking cool right now." I know what he did was wrong, and he could have killed himself or someone else, but that mugshot will always stay with me. If he doesn't go into NASCAR, I'll be disappointed. Mall in my old neighborhood was under renovations. Thieves built a facade and placed it over the night deposit slot for the bank with the sign, "Sorry for the inconvenience, temporary night deposit. Every store except one put the day's cash in it, plus other businesses in the area put their cash in." Thieves came back late at night, took the facade and sign, plus the money, and disappeared into the night. They were never caught, and estimates of the amount of cash were well over $100,000. Not a cop, but a friend of mine was in jail with an actual jewel thief. Apparently, before the actual robbery, he would case the place as a potential customer looking for an engagement ring for his made-up fiancée, put a hidden camera somewhere in the store aimed at the security pad, and then leave. Over the next 3 to 7 days, he would determine the schedule of the employees and the security code to turn off the alarm. Once he was confident he had an accurate idea of both, he would go back shortly before closing, put a down payment on a ring or put it on layaway, and then spend some time talking to the employee and using some impressive sleight of hand to get the key to the jewelry case off of their keyring without them noticing. Once he had that key, he was ready. The following morning, around 3 hours before opening, he would go back to the store, pick the front lock, and then put in the security code to turn off the alarm. Then he would open the jewelry cases with the key he had snagged from the employee, take all the jewelry he could, and walk out. The only reason he was caught was because the manager of the last store he tried to rob was in the middle of a divorce and sleeping in his car in the parking lot, so he saw it happening and called the cops. The cops connected him to the other robberies and told him he could tell them where his stash was and get 8 years or do a full 16. He chose the 16 years. He has millions in jewelry stashed away, so once he is out, he's set if he can make a clean getaway.
What inappropriate things do female coworkers do to male colleagues? I have one nip that's always erect. It's a side effect from when it was pierced. Had a female coworker who loved to walk by and flick it or outright pinch it. Didn't matter if I was talking to people or just passing her in the hallway. She thought it was playful and would do it all the time. I found it emasculating and embarrassing and asked her to stop repeatedly. It was annoying as F. I wanted to handle it quietly, but she wouldn't stop. Apparently, I was just too sensitive. Actually, it's my nip that's sensitive.
It's okay because you're gay. Gay guys like it.
Solution. She did it to me as we were entering a room for a staff meeting. I said in a slightly above normal voice in front of our entire team, "I need you to stop touching my nips. Never touch me again." You could hear a pin drop. Got an email from my boss later that day. "Your issue has been addressed. It will not happen again." How did a comment about my nips become the most viewed thing I've ever done on the internet? This one I see in the military a lot. Don't demand equality and treatment like men just to turn around and pull the "but I'm a female, I shouldn't have to do this" excuse. At a company meeting in front of a lot of our co-workers, a woman snuck up behind me and began to give me a neck rub without asking me for permission. I was not pleased, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make a scene.
When female colleagues massage my neck/shoulder region with one hand while I'm at my desk. Reverse the roles and I would have been seen as the creep.
Oh dear. Yeah, massage creeps crop up in all sorts of situations, and I might have briefly flirted with being one for a while, but mostly in my circle of friends, and I will discourage all of that non-consensual touchy-feely crap in others to my dying day. I had a coworker who couldn't wait to tell you about her medical issues. No matter how personal, no matter how much I asked her not to, I got a blow-by-blow of her pap, rectal exam, colonoscopy, and bathroom problems. I wasn't interested in her gynecological issues nor her gastrointestinal issues. Leave me out of it. I have a coworker who's in her 40s and is married with children. Every time I walked past her or I'm near her, she always calls me some pet name like baby or hot stuff. Sometimes it's a little more mundane, like handsome, but either way, she says it out loud where not only staff but students could also hear, and that's super awkward for me. When I used to be a cashier supervisor in retail, about 18 to 19 years old at the time, there was one girl cashier who asked me to come help her. She poked my stomach in front of a customer at the register where she was ringing up his products. I kinda just brushed it off and was very direct with this old man in his 50s who just watched this girl poke me. "Have a nice day, sir." He looked at me with a smile on his face, trying to hold back laughter. I was pretty embarrassed, but I didn't show it. On another occasion, she turned around and pointed her butt at me while looking at me and pointing at it. I think it probably has to be the weirdest way a girl has ever shown interest in me. Bonus story, while working at this retail job, I would greet guests coming through the front entrance. One time, 2 older ladies walked in and I said, "Hey guys, how are you today?" They kind of looked at me funny. About 30 minutes later, my store manager walks over and pulls me aside asking if I called 2 old ladies guys. I thought he was joking and smiled/chuckled. He was completely serious. They filed a complaint against me. Word to the wise, avoid calling older women guys. Don't touch my beard unless I invite you to do it. I don't care how big or fluffy it looks, leave it be. Bringing your hand that close to someone's face is kind of an intimate gesture. Just don't do it. I've had some women laugh at me because I don't drink, or drink as heavy as the other dudes, and I get told to grow a pair. I'm sorry, does being a male require me to drink my butt off all the time? A, I'm not drinking because I don't want so many calories because I sit my butt down at my desk all day. B, I'm Asian, and I can't physically take nearly as much alcohol as most burly guys. And C, I'm picky with my alcohol. If it tastes like pee to me, I don't like it. Stop asking me when me and my girlfriend are getting married. I'm already living that. Steve, you're 30. Why don't you have kids? Coworker, I've told you. Mrs. Steve has endometriosis and is being treated for it, and it's not an option currently. Leave me the frick alone about it.
But Steve, don't you want to have kids? Your kids would be so cute.
Rinse, repeat. I have a female coworker that likes to sit on the arm of my chair while we're supposed to do something work-related together. I mean, just pull up a chair and sit next to me. It's not like there aren't any chairs around. Yeah, just because I'm the only guy, that doesn't mean I automatically have to do all the lifting or damn furniture moving. I wasn't hired as a mule, and they would lose their minds if I told them, I don't clean, that's a woman's job. Don't call me hun or darling or any of those. I have a name. I'm not calling anyone babe or dame. And don't fricking touch me. I don't want a hug. I don't want to be playfully slapped. I don't want to be grabbed. We're not friends. I'll shake your hand. I'm not your pet project to feed your ego that you feel you know what looks good and what doesn't. Don't like my hair or clothes? Too fricking bad. If it's in the dress code, you shouldn't care. If I want to change my look, then I will change it. Not because you think this would look good on me, or that it would make me look more presentable. If I commented on your too short skirt or tight butt, skin-colored leggings, I'm sure I'd be pulled in front of HR. A few years ago, the HR manager, a woman around the same age as me, found out that it was my birthday. She got excited, grabbed my hand and led me, holding my hand the whole way, to the general manager's office to tell him that it was my birthday. I was super uncomfortable the whole time, both for her making a big deal over my 37th birthday as if I were turning 7 instead, and because she was holding my hand. I didn't know what to do, and she finally realized that she shouldn't be holding an employee's hand in front of the general manager, and she thankfully let go. I know it made the writer of the story very uncomfortable, but the image of a grown man, and not even a young one at that, being led off like a school kid is quite funny. Please, don't lift my shirt up to look at my chest and back. Yes, I know I'm hairy. If I did that to you, I'd be fricking fired.
I think we can agree that lifting someone's shirt clearly crosses the line.
I'm retired now, but women felt free to use the men's room whenever the women's room was occupied. I'd walk in and be told to get out. Men using the women's room would have caused a stir. Also, they completely ignore the dress code. Women could get away with wearing shorts and flip-flops to the office, but men had to wear slacks and acceptable non-sneaker shoes. I don't care if a woman uses the men's room, but if they told me to get out while doing so, I would absolutely refuse. If you're the one bending the rules, you have to be on your best behavior. Making statements about men in uniform being a fantasy for them. If I walked up to you in a coffee shop and told you I have a fantasy of doing MILFs or blondes or baristas or 21-year-olds, etc., while rubbing your arm, I would be in deep crap. Don't try to expose body parts to avoid a ticket. If I accidentally let my wang show on a traffic stop, I'd catch another charge. Don't invite me into your home if the reason you called me does not require it. It is very uncomfortable telling you 4 times that I do not need a cup of coffee. Yes, I know your kids are at school and your husband is at work. You've told me a half dozen times. But I'm here because someone drove over your mailbox and I'd really like to just finish this call and get back into my car because it's really cold and my lunch started 3 minutes before this call came out. Honestly, it's incredibly uncomfortable turning down advances while at work. I could be in a very isolated setting with a woman, or worse, a teenager, on a mundane call. Women can get nasty even when you turn them down as politely and respectfully as possible. I don't want you telling people I touched you or made an advance or insert unprofessional action here. Everyone hates cops now. Everyone loves a scandal and would believe you before any investigation. I have called supervisors and partners to a scene because I wanted someone there with me just because of a woman's statements or actions. Civil service is a lot like your food server. We're being polite because it's part of the job. Don't take my politeness as flirting. I've had a coworker who would jokingly slap my face. I asked her to stop many times. She would still slap me in the face. Either kinda hard on the face or as hard as she could on the arm. Told my boss if she slapped me again, I'd slap her right back, and got in trouble for even saying it. I wanted to add something. I agree completely with everyone saying I shouldn't have said I'd slap her back. However, at the time, I still think it outlined the hypocrisy of the situation. After following a conversation, my manager told me that if it happened again, to come back to him with CCTV footage, which covers 99% of where we work. He's an alright boss. I think he panicked at my remarks initially. Had a female coworker that would pinch people. She thought it was cute flirting. No, it's not cute to leave significant bruises all over my arms and chest. She even drew blood a few times because she dug in her nails so hard. Finally got her to stop by avoiding her at all costs and keeping at least an arm's length away from her. Oh yeah, that's definitely inappropriate behavior in the workplace and battery. Report that and escalate to police report if it's not being handled in-house. Just because you're a guy doesn't mean that it's not wrong. You and your boss should be taking this seriously. Don't put up with her behavior. You deserve a safe work environment. Number 1. My muscles are not free to touch just because they look big today. Number 2. Neither is my hair or beard. Number 3. No, I will not comment on your appearance because I don't care how you look and I won't validate or invalidate whatever nonsense you're feeling today. 4. Every request that begins with "a real man would," well, I guess I'm not a real man. Number 5. Not feeling like any undesirable or inconvenient chore is mine by default because I'm a man. Understand real man statements for what they are. Attempted manipulation. It's an immediate red flag that forces me to closely evaluate the statement and typically ends with me ignoring it on principle. This whole series of stories is just giving me flashbacks to being a barista in a coffee shop with loads of regulars. There were some female customers there who treated a few of the workers like a lot of these women treat their colleagues. Where I live, a lot of older women, older than 20s me, like 40, but not like 80, and more typically mothers, tend to refer to younger men by somewhat odd pet names. For example, honey, love, darling, dear, pet, and good lad. I imagine it's because they're just so used to referring to their children, who may well be close to my age, as such. Often when I'm very much their peer or even on occasion their superior. At worst, it's a touch condescending and consequently rude, and not that inappropriate, and it's commonly understood to be nice and well-meaning. However, outside the context of my own culture, for example when dealing with US peers whose workplaces are more corporate, it comes across as super weird and inappropriate and makes our US colleagues feel uncomfortable and harassed, which makes me uncomfortable. It puts me in the awkward position of having to call them on it. A relatively small complaint to have though, which is nice. Come to Yorkshire, the only time people don't call each other love is between two men. I went to visit an agency on Stoke-on-Trent. Our account manager had told me at a previous work trip abroad that affectionate duck was used over love in that area of the UK. They had a cook on site and she came into the meeting room to see what we wanted for lunch. As they introduced me, she went, "Alright, duck," and I nearly lost it with laughter. Please, just stop commenting about how cute I am and stop pulling my goddamn cheeks every time you're talking to me. I'm a 25-year-old grown man, for frick's sake. I should say that I do let the ladies do it because they're like my grandmas, and most heartbreaking of all is that they don't have a family to call their own. So they consider the 3 young people, me and my best friends AJ and Akash, as their sons and grandsons. Women would just sit on my desk and try to be flirty and this or that, trying to be suggestive or alluring, and it was just awkward as frick. Also, feeling me. Yeah, I lift, but grabbing my chest or shoulders or biceps and whatnot, imagine the outrage if I was a girl. It's the hypocrisy that tees me off more than anything. I've had it happen in several workplaces. Just because you're a guy, so you're obviously into female attention, and fit, these women believe they can feel you up all over your torso and sometimes go for the butt. Like, why don't we get off the clock and ask each other's permission to start groping each other? Maybe I'm not interested in you. If I walked up to any woman at work and said, "Wow, your hooters are huge today," grab bosom. "Those squats are working, cutie," grab butt. "Hey, can you get me that list for X?" hand on thigh. Those things would lose me my job immediately, but women can comment on physique and feel me up constantly with no repercussions. The few times I've gone to a boss about it, I'm the butthole. Stop coming up to me with office gossip. You're wasting my time. I don't care if Jessica is sleeping with so-and-so or if Carol is a real witch. Stop coming up to me to show me your 3-year-old put his shirt on backwards with a 10-minute backstory. I've never met your family. I don't want to meet your family. You're my co-worker and not my friend. I don't care. When I have a mustache, don't call it a prawn stash. Don't make jokes about me being inappropriate with children. It's facial hair, not a sexual organ. Please, do not touch me. Just don't touch me. I wouldn't touch you. Don't touch me. And now for the actual inappropriate acts, which only seems to come from women who are 40 or older. Don't call my haircut or outfit or anything hot. If I did that, I'd be in trouble. Don't talk to me about your romantic life. I don't want to hear about your man going down on you just as much as you don't want to hear about me railing my latest Tinder match. Don't ask my help with moving some files from a computer to a USB drive if those files are exposed photos of yourself that you've recently taken. Don't rub your chest, moan and lift your shirt, exposing your 55-year-old bosom in a bra while exclaiming, "None of y'all could handle this." Well, at least that last one was fired. Don't slap my butt. Don't grab my waist. Don't touch my chest. I've been harassed in most jobs I've had. I happen to have mostly worked in female-dominated industries. It's more of a mild annoyance or inconvenience for me because I've never felt threatened or in danger, but that doesn't make it right. Yeah, while it's true that these kinds of things happening to men can be very upsetting and even traumatizing, for the most part we don't feel physically threatened by the harassers. It's good to see this as a call for solidarity against people who use inappropriate behavior across both genders. Had a woman at work fired for walking over to one of her subordinates' desks when he had a question and sat on his lap. I'm guessing he made a loud enough stink because security escorted her out that Friday. Yeah, I should think about that. My female coworkers have a weird obsession with my butt. Can't even count how many times it's been slapped by them. Some of them are okay looking while others are downright ugly. I work for a middle-aged Italian man, and the one time I brought it up, he asked me if I was gay. I declined and he told me to suck it up. It doesn't bother me that much, but I know if I'd do the same thing, I would be fired and possibly charged with sexual harassment. I think that double standard bothers me more. A bunch of them constantly talk about people's sexuality. I don't really care, but they keep insisting I'm gay. Not in a negative way, because they always say, not that it's a bad thing. I guess it's just C-wordness more than anything else.
Females in Australia have the yearly charity firefighter calendars up. These are shirtless calendars of muscle men. This is in a public service office in Australia. I'm not offended, but if I put up a bikini calendar, I would immediately be in trouble.
Just make sure it's a charity bikini calendar.
And no, not the kind where the woman is named Charity.
Do not talk to men about how much you hate men. You put them in a lose-lose scenario. If they agree with you, they're self-hating. If they argue with you, you brand them as a chauvinist pig. So please, simply ask them, did you literally just come over here to talk to me about how much you hate people like me? Then they're in the position of having to defend themselves.
Oh, I don't mean all men.
You literally just said, I hate all men.
Yeah, that's just a figure of speech. I just hate the sexist men. I didn't mean you.
Now, I get it, and she didn't mean me, and I agree because sexist men were a constant hassle each and every day, but the word sexist in that phrase matters. It matters because I've had more than one friend go off the deep end on that phrase and forget that not all, insert gender here, is a terrible piece of crap. Collective grouping is lazy and leads to false conclusions.
I hate when reps bat their eyes to try to convince you to go with their product over another. I will make my decision on efficacy and price, thank you very much, not on whether or not you'll give me an ocular pull job.
I had a coworker who was sitting on a flimsy makeshift table and fell through it. He got stuck and the girls surrounded him and tried to take his wang out of his jeans. Pretty sure it made him uncomfortable because he shouted at them. To clarify, they weren't actually trying to take his wang out. They laughed and joked about it and fondled the general area of his zipper and tugged at his belt. One was shouting, "Get his belt! Get his belt!" The guy's name was Patrick and the book he was reading got ruined. Fell into a knocked-over bottle of Mountain Dew Code Red.
Where do you work?
He works from home. Wow, that is messed up. Poor guy. I work in an environment that's heavily female dominant. Until our 2 new hires started yesterday, I was the only man in the office. Don't tell me the details about your life at home. I really can't explain in words how much I don't give an F about what your husband said that made you mad, or your dealings with so-and-so and that said something, and what you said in response. I get that women process stuff differently overall, and I know they aren't looking for solutions, they just want empathy, so I listen and put up with it. But there are 2 women on my team about whom I know far more than any man not married to them has a right to. General cattiness. For instance, this one old lady would complain about how the younger girls would dress like working girls, while she wore deep-cut blouses that showed her wrinkly old chest. I don't care what anyone wears, but I never understood that. I'm a younger female who's often worked in environments like this. I've never worked in environments that had dress codes except for things that would be safety issues, like wearing flip-flops, which was never really enforced, even. On a couple of occasions, at different places, I had co-workers, always middle-aged and female, get offended at something I wore, which was something modest. The older ones often wore things inappropriate, bra straps popping out, sheer clothing, too tight pants, etc. But I'm the one who offends people. Stop asking my opinion about their bodies, like asking if those clothes make their bosoms or butts look big. Stop asking about my feelings when I only ask you to send an email to the supervisor about some pressing issues with accounts. Please don't talk aloud in the rec room while we're at lunch. Your romantic life is not that important for an audience. Stop saying things like, "Imagine a guy like him," pointing at me, but with a bigger beer belly, and trying to guess our wang sizes solely based on our hands or feet. Don't use my shoulders to cry on because I look like your older brother when your last Tinder boyfriend slept with your friend. Oh, and don't show pictures of you wearing some lingerie and ask if your boyfriend will enjoy that treat. All these examples I pointed out happened along the years. I'm only in my mid-30s and along the years moved between jobs several times, and these are just some of the things I've remembered that if the genders were reversed would be made into a call to HR. Did your high school ever have an incident or event? What was it? My high school had some kind of scandal with a music teacher and an underage boy. The school's reputation was so trashed they had to change the name of the school to keep people from making the association. A student at my high school shot himself in the chest at lunchtime in front of his ex-girlfriend because she had broken up with him. He didn't survive. I used to live in the United States Virgin Islands on a smallish island called St. Thomas, and back in my freshman year, school was called off early within the first few periods of the day, and we weren't allowed to leave the buildings we were in until our parents came to pick us up. No one was really sure what was happening until SWAT teams pulled up to the school and started filing out along the street, and that's when word reached us that a Bengal tiger had escaped within the island, which was a surprise considering our nearest zoo catered to aquatic animals. Once my dad came to pick me up, I was escorted out of the school's gates with 2 SWAT members covering both sides, and as we left, learned that most of the main town had been occupied by SWAT teams, which I wasn't even aware we had on the island up until that point, with roadblocks set up here and there, all ready to stop themselves a tiger. The next day, however, we learned that there was not an escaped tiger on the island, but that there was instead a lost Bengal cat that had been named Tiger by its owner that was misprinted in the newspaper as being an actual tiger that caused a giant frickin' panic across the whole island. In conclusion, part of an island was shut down by a fricking house cat. Since there's been a few people asking if he was ever found, from what I can gather, the tiger has been missing to this day.
Holy crap, I think you win the thread.
My school was having a spirit week and one of the days was superheroes and supervillains, like Marvel or DC. Someone came dressed in a full clan member outfit because she wanted to be a villain. Bunch of local news stations reported the story and everyone in our area knew about it. My school had a spirit week and one of the days was Heritage Day. Some African American kids thought it would be funny to dress up as slaves. We didn't have a Heritage Day the next year. Well, both of these stories were funny and incredibly effed up at the same time. Well done to everyone involved, and I hope none of them ever did it again. One kid dressed up as the Easter Bunny and was throwing candy off the senior balcony during a lunch period. I remember everyone being really excited until there was a fight over a specific candy bar. I've never been more excited to see teachers run after someone in a bunny suit in my entire life. That's some logic right there. People are fighting over a candy bar. Better chase the person who gave it to them. We had a fight week. 23 fights in 7 days. Doubled the cops at our school. A friend of mine and his girlfriend killed themselves within 2 days of each other after their breakup. It was horrible. RAM had just released Everybody Hurts, and they played it at the girl's funeral, to a group of high schoolers attending the second funeral of a fellow student in less than a week. It was rough. The Speech and Debate Club was suspended for 2 years after it was revealed that the officers were embezzling club funds. I went to a very boring high school. Adult family members of an expelled student came to the school and in the middle of class proceeded to beat up the teacher who was the reason he was expelled, as well as the janitor who came to see what all the commotion was. Teacher had a bloody nose and janitor had to be taken out on a stretcher with several broken ribs. We had a kid at my high school who brought his dad in for one of his beefs. I don't know what it was over exactly. I think it was an underage girl, cue facepalm, but the bad dad in question went so far as to bring brass knuckles to the on-campus fight. Because all adults know that beating the crap out of some kid your son doesn't like is best done on a high school campus populated by cameras and actual cops. Rough town. Rumors went around that the one being beat up died because bad dad punched his face to a bloody pulp, but I can't believe this because high school. My college suspended some students for eating breakfast during a lecture. One of the students decided to upload the hilarious suspension letter in Facebook, which mentioned suspended for eating or something like that. The picture went viral, local media caught it, national media caught it. College's day of shame. Back in high school, a few grades above me, there were about 5 people who decided to have a mass adult fun time party, and they all ended up getting herpes. Well, people found out as they usually do, and from that point on, everyone in the area who heard my school's name instantly thought we all had herpes. Funnily enough, when on vacation in Colorado, a group I met at the same hotel from Texas had heard about my school's infamy somehow and thought it was hilarious. This was about 3 years after the incident, and my school was in Wisconsin. An assistant principal was arrested for killing his wife and trying to make it look like she took her own life. They made a Dateline or 48 Hours mystery about it. I can't remember. He was a pretty nice guy, but not to her, I guess.
He was a pretty nice guy, but not to her, I guess? Understatement of the year.
Our school stopped the yearly high school trip to Six Flags the year before I got to high school because someone, who I knew and was friends with my older brother, hopped off the Yosemite Sam ride and punched off Bugs Bunny's head. The cool guy Spanish teacher had a long-term relationship with multiple students, even paying for a few child terminations. That was like 10 years ago and I'd forgotten about it until a guy I knew from high school posted some new footage of the teacher shaking hands with Geraldo Rivera about 2 months ago. Not sure how he's not in prison.
Bomb threat, kid threw acid on his friend's leg, basketball coach put a camera in the office and taped girls changing.
How was that last school going after so much scandal? Jeepers creepers. It was 5th grade and recess after lunch had been cancelled because some parents complained about kids not having enough time to eat, even though you could be dismissed at any time by a teacher and could take as long as you wanted to eat. Everyone was upset, so this kid named Luke and a few of his friends decided we wanted to do something about it. Within minutes, everyone in the cafeteria was out of their minds, screaming, "We want recess!" swearing and throwing food at the lunch staff, and several people made a break for it and tried to run out of the lunchroom. Luke and a few others were suspended that day, and luckily their sacrifice meant that recess was reinstated for the rest of us. We now simply refer to the incident as the lunchroom riot. It never actually happened, but there was a rumor that there was going to be a shooting in my high school because somebody wrote on a bathroom stall in the department store next to the school that it was going to happen. And the best part of the day was seeing all the football team coaches standing around with baseball bats and nail boards. Senior class took fertilizer and other chemical agents to burn a giant dong into the football field. It could be seen on Google Maps for quite some time.
I hear that you can do 2 different dongs in 2 different locations using different chemicals. One kills the grass now, one kicks in when the new term starts, but I can't remember what you were supposed to use.
I'll bring this up for the 15-year reunion. During my sophomore year, the student body orchestrated a walkout because most of our electives were being cut to save money. Teachers who were losing their jobs also walked out with us. Classes like auto shop, wood shop, photography, home economics, all gone. The walkout did help as a few were reinstated the following year, while others were after my class graduated. My senior class did something similar. Our graduation date was being pushed back by 2 weeks so that we would graduate in the new auditorium that was being built. They informed us of this a month before our original graduation date. Since it's a tradition for seniors to go to Myrtle Beach the week after graduation, during senior week there, a lot of us had already made hotel reservations that would have cost money to cancel or change. What they didn't expect was for us to organize a sit-in in the cafeteria once the news broke. It lasted for an entire day until the newly elected superintendent showed up and told us that, while he respected what we were doing, that we'd better not pull anything like this again. We effectively got our graduation moved back to its original date and graduated in the gym while the next class was the first to graduate from the new auditorium. I don't know if it's relevant or not, but we were reading Animal Farm in AP English at the time, which may or may not have had a hand in our rebellion. Also, I know seniors reading Animal Farm in an AP English class is incredulous. I went to a public school in the poorest county in one of the poorest states in the US, West Virginia. Our teachers were constantly badgered to tailor their curriculum around material that would be covered on standardized tests. Higher or improved test scores meant that the school district would get more grant money. My school did frick all in terms of preparing us for higher education, and other than myself and a few close friends I still talk to, very few of us actually went on to get a degree. This girl posted on a transgender YouTube channel saying how she was going to blow up her high school and kill a lot of people. She described how she could do it because she was a student teacher, and she knew how to get away with it and kill the most people. The people on my channel notified police that tracked it down to my high school, and we had a huge lockdown because they had to check for any explosives. Well, that's certainly one way to get views on your channel, even if they are mostly coming from one police department. We had a PE teacher who'd done some awful things to some of the kids, who had left the year before I arrived. His replacement found this out, and instead of reporting this to the police and the school authorities, he wrote letters to all the parents of the children he thought were involved, and then went public to the newspapers. He got fired, and eventually, 6 years later, the former guy got imprisoned for 12 years. I was in my junior year, and it was finals week. Everyone usually gets to school about 20 minutes before class starts, and we just walk around the place talking with friends. Then all the teachers started ushering us all towards the road and away from the school. There was an active bomb threat. My high school was kind of a magnet school in a decent area, so we had no idea what was going on. Turns out some freshmen got scared and called in a bomb threat to get out of finals, on his own cell phone. We had fun though. One of my classmates was a DJ on the weekends. His pickup truck was a sort of convertible instant party, and he stood there killing it for over an hour. My high school used to allow every other year for the foreign language classes to go to that respective country over spring break. The school decided that the funds weren't there for it anymore, but still allowed people to go if they paid for it themselves and parents went with them. Anyway, the German class went to Germany, and of course the high school-age kids will drink over there. Well, the school caught wind and suspended all of them and kicked them out of National Honor Society. The uproar was insane. The school no longer sanctioned the trip nor paid, so they didn't have the right to do that, since it wasn't during school time. One of the parents of the students is very rich. They threatened the school by not giving their annual donation. Sure enough, all the students were reinstated.
Wait, what? The school would allow them to go on a private vacation on their own time with their own money? Did the school also have the power to say, "Frick you, Colin, you're not allowed to visit your grandma this weekend"?
One kid died in my gym class. We were doing a swimming lesson, so everyone was in the pool doing some laps, learning how to do the different strokes. After some laps, the gym teacher had us get out of the pool. A minute or so goes by, and someone shouts that there's someone at the bottom of the pool. I don't know if the gym teacher froze up or what, but it was a few seconds before a student finally dove in to drag him out of the pool. The teacher finally snaps out of it and tries to start CPR, and yells for someone to grab the defibrillator from the hallway. He tries to revive the kid, but it was too late, unfortunately. The kid was taking some meds, not sure what he was taking, maybe something for ADD or depression, but the autopsy came back showing he'd overdosed on whatever he was taking, so it was a deliberate taking of his own life. The kid overdosed before gym class, knowing that we were swimming in the pool. It was a really sad day, to say the least. Back in middle school, a deer got spooked by one of the school buses and jumped through the classroom window and started wandering the halls. My class then constructed a plan for if that ever happened again. It did not.
A part of me hopes that the plan involved the principal suplexing the deer.
Since people have been asking, the plan was to designate 2 people to throw the desks at the deer. One throws theirs high and the other throws theirs low. I was not picked as one of the throwers, unfortunately, but that's probably a good thing since I probably would have just cowered in the corner and not fulfilled my part of the plan. A guy decided to hang himself in the graveyard next to the school in full view of all the students. This being a religious school, they took it extremely seriously, doing mandatory class therapy sessions and crap when half the school didn't even see the body. There was also an abusive teacher there at the time who would threaten to or actually hit the kids for teeing him off. Not sure how he kept his job for so long. Eventually, he did lose it because he was having inappropriate conversations with a student over Snapchat. Always knew something was up with him. A fight broke out in the middle of the hallway while we were switching classes. Everyone crowded around to watch. The school cop burst in about a minute later and tased one of the guys fighting. He hit the floor and a bunch of kids started screaming that he had heart problems and to stop. A kid next to me exclaimed,
"Oh crap, they're tasing people!"
And he took off down the hallway running at full speed. He hit a corner and slid, falling flat on his face, and a gallon of milk fell out of his backpack and splattered all over the floor. To this day, I don't know why that kid had a gallon of milk at school. This story was more or less C grade and par for the course until the milk came out of the backpack, which has upgraded it to a solid A. Well done, Milk Kid.
This is actually kind of a saga. Luckily, it didn't happen directly to me. I grew up in a small rednecky town in midwestern Wisconsin. Think about the stereotype that brings up and you're pretty much on the level as to how it really was at the time I was there. It was one of those small schools that housed all the K-12 students in the same building, but separate wings, although we used the same lunchroom. My class was the biggest on record up until then, and we had something like 80 students in it. I was actually in middle school when this happened, so early 90s, but one of the 2 high school English teachers was a man named Gene Doonigan. Gene was like the stereotype right out of the Wonder Years, horn-rimmed glasses and all. Gene was frickin' mean as a motherfricker. He was one of those buttholes who would grab and twist your ear and lead you down to the main office himself. Happened to me once, and I wasn't even his student. My crime was not having all 4 of my chair legs on the ground. He made sure it hurt. Gene was also a drunk. He eventually got fired because he was wasted in class. Some high schooler mouthed off to him, and he punched the kid full-on in the face. Poor guy was wearing glasses, which of course broke, and the cuts he got from the glass needed stitches. But it doesn't end there. This was a small town, remember, and Gene was also the sitting town judge. He didn't lose that position, and my particular town had one of those incestuous police departments, and Gene was basically the guy calling the shots for them. He had always had a reputation for forming personal grudges and using the PD to stake them out and try to bust them for something. He especially did this to what he considered the undesirables in the school, basically the ones who looked like they used substances, who, to be honest, were usually substance users, but he didn't like the metalheads either. With nothing more to do with his time, he went all out on the kids in town he didn't like. This went on for years, but I don't have any personal stories because my mom was a town clerk and I was somehow immune from being harassed. A lot of my friends weren't. Well anyways, eventually he retired from that, and almost immediately he was arrested for trying to do the unspeakable act with an autistic kid. He was convicted and died in prison. It was a sweet satisfaction that happened. Our high school stopped having dances because one girl gave a guy head during an event and got caught. Turns out it was my sister's best friend at the time. I like to think my sister was much classier than that. People are asking which school. I'm tempted not to say just to rustle some jimmies. A few, I guess. Dead pig left in a Tesco bag in the sports field. It was break time, various teens ran out to play football, and there it was, a dead pig in a bag. A guy in my year fell out of his bedroom window trying to smoke sneakily. A graffiti tribute was made on one of the school buildings and promptly removed as it was vandalism. A girl in the year below mine had an affair with a school bus driver, resulting in several child terminations and a certain bus driver being suspended. Changing rooms were set on fire. I was off ill on the day, returned to school the following day to find everyone had detention until somebody owned up. I feel it was rather unfair that I was detained when I was off sick. Labs set on fire and copper wire stolen, but we know who did it and they got suspended. 2 teachers had nervous breakdowns and went stark raving loony in front of the students before quitting the teaching profession.
We had a presentation about tolerance, which was stupid as my school was super laid back, people had issues, but not about race or gender, in our auditorium. This was in 2009, just after Obama's election. At one point, the group is on stage and making small talk to us. Guy on stage, "We got a new president, President Obama. How do you guys feel about that?" Or some stupid pandering crap. Guy in the crowd stands and shouts, "We don't need a frickin' N-word in the White House." Holy crap, dude. I was in the upper bowl next to some of the black and Latino kids. This kid says his piece and everybody next to me is on him, like 35 feet between us and a flight of stairs. This kid gets the crap beat out of him. Teachers finally managed to pull everybody off. Kid has to be taken to the hospital, luckily nearby. Afterwards, we realized that we had no idea who the kid was. Turns out he was with the group and was supposed to say that as a thought-provoking kind of thing about how offensive and hurtful racism is. They didn't tell any of the staff about this. The presentation went on fine, but nobody was paying attention anymore. We were all furious. He was okay, by the way. None of my class got in trouble. They apologized afterwards. Also, we were mostly a white school, maybe 60%, and it wasn't just the black kids jumping on him. Mexicans, whites, whatever. After it happened, they said they stopped doing that bit. Next stop was apparently Chicago, so good call. Classmate slapped his girlfriend for going to a dance with someone else. A couple of days later, she was not in school. During math, her mum comes in and says to my classmate, "You took a piece of my heart, and now I'm going to take a piece of yours." And then she pulls out a Crocodile Dundee-sized Bowie knife, tells everyone to leave, and starts chasing him around the room with it, while he and the teacher threw desks at her. No, the girl didn't kill herself. The mum just kept her home because she was going to try to get all stabby at school. The mum went to prison. Oh, and some kids were playing with bits of sodium or potassium in chemistry class by throwing it in the sink and watching it fizzle. It's normally stored under oil because it reacts in air and violently with water. One kid pocketed it, and they took it to the locker room to throw bigger bits in the toilet. They heard someone coming, panicked, and threw the whole thing in and flushed. It blew the toilet into pieces. Years ago, my school was accused of promoting slavery because of a book included in our curriculum. I think the book was called Slavery, as it was, if I recall correctly. Newsworthy. Reporters were outside our school for about a week. ABC News called for a comment. Students were instructed not to talk to any of the reporters. The rumors got really exaggerated, but it originated from an angry parent. Eventually, it blew over. Not high school, but 8th grade. Me and the whole boys' PE class was pulled out of class for a day so the teachers could sniff out the ninja crapper. Apparently someone was stealth crapping in as many places as they could get away with. It happened in the school hallway, the urinals, the girls' bathroom, the walls, the cafeteria. If you named it, the ninja crapper had probably crapped there. The school never figured out who did it, and this went on for over a month. Hospital staff. What are your experiences with people waking from anesthesia? A patient woke up from his wisdom tooth removal, begging the doctor to let him be David Bowie. The doctor actually asked how that was supposed to happen, and the answer was that it would be fantastic. He then sang a pitch-perfect rendition of Space Oddity in an admirable Bowie impression, peed his pants, and passed out. Had a patient ring in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we placed a speculum, think a ball gag but a metal ring instead of a ball, in his mouth through which to pass the scope so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they're under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the safe word was before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole OR erupted in laughter. I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she's always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag, and wants to bang her husband. She's just going off, and sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This is probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. Oh no, poor sis. Well, hopefully that anesthetic-induced spell was the motivation the sisters needed to hash out their differences once everyone was lucid again.
Is it like alcohol where the whole lot of truth is said when drunk/sedated? Or is it just fantasy bullcrap nonsense that people can sometimes spew?
The whole truth comes out when you're drinking thing is probably just an old wives' tale anyway. Being inebriated in any way doesn't lend itself to fluid thinking or speaking. So I'm going to say it's just Fantasyland type stuff. My dad was in a really bad motorcycle crash a while back, and when he was in and out of it, he was saying crazy crap, like, "Honey, we can't keep living in this fricking tree," to my mum. Then he kept making everyone leave the room but me to tell me father-son secrets, which included crap like, "Go in the closet and get the kid with the big head out of the garbage bag and tell him to get a job." I had a patient pet an invisible kitty that was named after me. The next day was completely with it and was wondering what happened to that kitty. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations, and I had an old guy wake up, and the first thing he asked was, "Do I still have my balls?" I told him, "Yep, both of them," and he said, "Both? Oh, you guys are great." Not a hospital staff, but my great-grandfather had surgery one time, and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran and was convinced that he was in a German World War II prisoner of war camp. He recognized me and told him I had to help him escape by killing the guards, or nurses, because he knew I knew how to kill people. I was 16, obviously a trained killer. When the nurse came in, he was calm and kept motioning with his head at her to me and finally looked at me and said, "Kill her, now!" She always came back with another male nurse after that. "Hey Grandpa, remember that time you told me to murder all the hospital staff?" "Yeah." "I've never had a normal relationship." Wow, my grandfather had a similar response. He was convinced he was back in the war. He said, "Don't go downstairs. They're doing awful things to the prisoners there." When he came to, I asked him about that, and he didn't want to talk about it. He was not a prisoner of war in the war, but was a guard at one of our own camps in the US. He said there were both good and bad guys on both sides and would not elaborate further. Nurse here, this really big hairy Turkish guy who I've never met before, told me how he loved me and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male, by the way. My father-in-law was in a car accident that shattered his face, several vertebrae, and his pelvis. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam, and he was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told him that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon, she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked, and the nurse explained that he destroyed the restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and my final time, I was about 7, I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cue the following conversation. Me. "Why are the Rugrats on?" Doctor. "You woke up earlier and you said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats. We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry." Me. "Why did I want to be angry?" Doctor. "You said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time." That's hilarious. Are you still a happy person, or did the Rugrats ruin you? Rugrats did not ruin my happiness, for long, but depression has for the past year or so, as is the case with your average Redditor. It gets easier, but it's a really slow process. Still, I do my best to wake up and make every day count for something that matters to me, because I know in the end that's what's going to make a difference. As you can probably imagine, I had a very early angsty phase. Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in bed in a hospital room waiting for surgery, and they'd already given me the meds to calm me down, but they knocked me out. 2 nurses came in to move me to a gurney, but they were small and I'm big, and they can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs, saying, "You're snoring, roll over," and I rolled right onto the gurney. Your wife is brilliant. Just goes to show a stern word from the right partner can cut through even the harshest, debilitating substance effects on the male human body. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm, so I hadn't been on a ward, etc. prior to the operation. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, "Sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We're in the morgue." Ha ha ha. I hope they didn't hear you. Oh, they heard all right. It was an awkward stay after that. My first memory when waking up from shoulder surgery was a somewhat panicked nurse rummaging through the blankets at the bottom of my bed, repeatedly muttering, "Where are his legs? Where are his legs?" I always cross my legs when I sit or lay down, and apparently I must have done this, as I was initially coming off the anesthesia. It freaked me out for a second, but then I processed what was going on. The nurse seemed relieved when I mumbled, "They're right there," and nearly kicked her in the face when I extended my legs. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mum was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my balls are itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down my skin so I can scratch my gonads. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hand runs down in excess of smooth skin, then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around and come to the conclusion that somebody has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, "Oh mum, they've shaved my pubes. I'm not happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's not right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes." My mother was mortified and she's trying to calm me down while laughing and trying to avoid a scene. They grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the time it was a serious issue. Yo, my balls were mad itchy after appendicitis surgery too, and yeah, the pain after the surgery was worse than the appendicitis. I'd gone into surgery with underwear on and came out with no underwear and no pubes. Very confusing. To clarify, my surgery was laparoscopic, so they made horizontal incisions, and the lowest one is encroaching on my pube territory. So to avoid contamination or whatever, they shave ya. I was 15 when I went into surgery for my very nearly ruptured appendix, but unfortunately I was also a shy teenage girl. I kept my undies on under the gown. Before I completely faded out on the table, I heard someone say, "Why does she still have her underwear on?" The first time I went for surgery, I completely forgot to take mine off. It just didn't cross my mind, even though I'm a nurse and I'm fully aware. When I was in the recovery room coming around, the nurse waved a little plastic bag in front of me with underwear in it and was like, "Don't worry, we'll put these in your bag." I'm glad. They were Cookie Monster underwear. Yes, I'm a 27-year-old female, don't judge. So I'm an ER tech, and we have this regular that comes in all the time. She's an old black lady who has a lot of health issues, including dementia. This time, I'm actually not entirely sure why she was coming in, but whatever it was, she needed to be intubated. So we sedated her, put the tube in, and did what we needed. When everything was finished, we called EMS to pick her up and take her back home. When they arrived, the nurse and I went to prep her to leave. The lady is just starting to wake up from sedation, so with EMTs standing in the room, we take out her Foley catheter. She then toots out of her hoo-ha. The nurse and I smirk at each other, but this is fairly common and not the funny part. The funny part is that the noise seemed to surprise her and apparently remind her what was going on, because she gasps, then looks over to the EMTs and says in an attempt at a sexy voice, "You boys ever seen a black hoo-ha before?" Everyone in the room had to take a second to attempt to regain composure, but the EMTs ended up having to leave the room and the nurse is crouching on the ground trying not to die. I, since I still have the Foley in my hands, don't have this freedom and am forced to keep my sides from launching into orbit. It's since become a running joke around the ER. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady, like 350 pounds. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model. Why don't you come home with me and my wife?" Yes, he was propositioning a three-way with a 50-year-old 350-pound nurse. Most awkward moments of my life.
How nice he wanted to include you, though.
Even high out of his mind, he wouldn't even consider the thought of not including you. True love right there. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued, my wife informed me, at least at the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well, and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did so, I told her, "Mom, you have a lot of dogs, and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has a sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a frickin' sloth in here. How did we catch one? They're so fast." Then she tried to take my jeans off me so I could go to sleep, and I yelled, "Whoa there, missy," when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. When I was 14, I had eye surgery. Coming out of anesthesia, the nurses asked me if I could remember my name. I slurred, "My name is Worcestershire Sauce." No, wait, that's not a cool name. My name is Shark.
I can't even pronounce Worcestershire sauce completely sober. Impressive.
So this comment was written, and I'm unable to tell if they pronounced it Worcestershire, and it's going to bother me for the remainder of this recording. My fiancée recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes, she told her mother,
"Now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his wang in my mouth."
It was awkward. When I got my wisdom teeth out, I apparently called my Middle Eastern surgeon a sly Arabian tooth thief after coming to. That was fun to learn about when I regained mental clarity. I had surgery on my wrist and I came out of anesthesia screaming, "My balls hurt!" The doctor came in and asked what was wrong. I said, "My balls hurt!" He replied, "Dude, you got wrist surgery. No one touched your balls." Doesn't necessarily mean they couldn't have been hurting though. We're trained to do manual handling of the patient a certain way. But sometimes while transferring from the trolley or bed into an operating table, things can not go entirely right and part of the body hits something or is mishandled. Note, we obviously try to avoid this, and 99% of the time, nothing happens. There's also sterile drapes all over one's body, except the surgery place, pretty much in any surgery. Some surgeons forget there's a body there and kinda use it as a table, so some damage could derive from that, depending on exactly what happened. All this to say, someone might have accidentally hurt your balls during surgery. I had a lady in her 70s who drank martinis and took Xanax all day, every day. So she had such a strong tolerance to the sedation I was giving her that she just totally stopped breathing while still awake. I had to say, "Ma'am, I'm gonna have to bag you now," and she mouthed, "Okay," and I put the ambu bag on her face and force-breathed for her until she got her respiratory effort back. Another story, I was helping with a heart procedure and the patient went into complete heart block and his heart stopped beating. I hop up on the table and start chest compressions while they're hurriedly trying to put in a temporary pacing wire. I had an arterial pressure waveform on the monitor, so I could see exactly how hard to do the compressions, and the man never lost consciousness. So I'm doing chest compressions on a dude while he looks right at my face the whole time. So it was like, press, press, sorry, press, press, sorry, for about 2 minutes until the pacing wire was in place. Not a doc, but a few years ago I had my gallbladder removed. 2 stories from that ordeal. Going into surgery, I was being given anesthesia. During this, I apparently looked up at the tech and asked him to remove the mask from my face so I could scratch my nose. He said, "No," and I passed out halfway through my response of, "Aww." Still very out of it, getting ready to be discharged after a day if I recovered. It was very bad and I was on a lot of meds. I stood up to change and could feel the incision just below my navel open. I looked down and my hand was red and there was a growing red spot on the gown. I look up and see the color drain from my mother's face, to which I respond, "It's cool, I got this." Got back into bed, hit the call button and say, "I don't mean to bother you, but one of my incisions appears to have reopened. No, I'm not in pain, but there is a fair bit of blood. If you could have someone stop by when they're free, that would be awesome." Not 15 seconds later, a nurse comes flying into the room, looks and says, "Holy crap, be right back with supplies," and flies out of the room before returning and fixing the problem. When asked why I wasn't panicking, I simply responded, "I figure I'm already in the right place for this sort of thing." I was the patient. I'd had all 4 wisdom teeth out at once, and I woke up earlier than expected for recovery. Early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking, and panicked. I leapt off the bed and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them, and definitely gave one of them a good punch before they got me back in the bed. I passed out again straight away. Still feel bad about it. Poor nurse. When I got all 4 of my wisdom teeth taken out, the nurse tried to put me in a wheelchair. Cue dialogue. Super hot nurse, "Let's get you in a wheelchair." Me, "I got it, baby." Think Fetty Wap type accent. I'm very white. Super hot nurse, "Oh no, I don't think that's a good idea." Me, tries to stand but slams into wall and slides down face first. Super hot nurse, "Oh no." She put me in the wheelchair and rolled me to the car. I giggled the whole way there while leaning my head on her hand and looking up at her face. Side note, hands down the best 2 weeks of summer I've ever had. KFC potatoes and ice cream all day while in a medicated stupor? Hell yes. I hear I just played Minecraft with my little brother and dug enormous holes the entire time. About a week and a half afterwards, I asked him what the frick I'd been doing, and he said, "You've dug 4 50 by 50 holes to bedrock with staircases around the sides. All the minerals are in 200 large chests surrounding the holes." When he asked why 50 by 50, he said that I turned to him, looked him in the eye and told him, "It's what they would have wanted." All of our friends were tripping out, saying, "What's he doing?" He'd reply, "What do you think? He's being force-fed mashed potatoes while he mumbles, 'We're almost finished. The plans will be completed.'" I love this story. Also, playing video games in a med-induced trance while being fed soft foods kinda sounds like the best-case scenario post-hospitalization to me. Came out of anesthetic and the lead nurse decides it's time to tell me about post-op care. She says, "Now this is going to be a pain in the butt," and I said, "If that's the case, then you guys performed the wrong procedure." It was a nose operation. The assistant nurse started laughing. Lead nurse not so amused. When I got my wisdom teeth out, they strapped my arm down for the IV anesthetic. Apparently before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist and said in my best Connery, "Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk?" The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone ever asked him in a haze. My dental surgeon had a hilarious Bond villain-esque name, and I made some jokes about it in the weeks up to getting my wisdom teeth out, like how I hoped I still had my kidneys when I woke up, etc. On the actual day, I was petrified of making the same jokes to the surgeon in a drug-induced haze and embarrassing myself. So apparently, I kept asking the nurse, "I didn't say anything bad, did I?" "No, my darling, you were out like a light." "Are you sure I didn't say anything bad?" Over and over. A friend was in a car crash, pretty bad. He was in a coma for 2 months and he had a female doctor. For 2 months until he came out of his coma, every time his doctor was checking on him, he would reach up and grab her bosom, guessing he heard her voice. When we told him about that, he didn't believe us, so he asked her and she confirmed it. She said she never stopped him because it seemed to keep him calm. I think this qualifies. Colonoscopy, in this big lounge chair, still half asleep in recovery. I half roll over and let rip the biggest toot in history. The devil himself created this one. I open half an eye at the nurse and ask, "Was that me?" Jaw on the ground. She nods and I go back to sleep. I mean, you have to toot after the colonoscopy or they don't let you go home. Give back the air or we'll call the police. As a patient, I had to get 5 teeth pulled. The nurse was helping my mum shuffle me to the car. I turned to thank her but couldn't get my mouth to work, so I bowed and doffed an imaginary cap. Anesthesia? My BFF had a vasectomy, and when he was first given the drugs, 3 nurses walked in there that were rather attractive. He looked up with his wife in the room and says, "If I would have known there was going to be hot women in here, I would have worn my big dick." He wasn't put under, just given drugs to relax him. I'm guessing Valium or something equivalent. And he is one funny motherfricker to begin with. When the surgery was over, the doctor was telling him he needed to arrive 10 times before he was sterile. As he was being wheeled out of the waiting room and in front of little kids, he was demanding a prescription for oral fun times. Probably my proudest moment of him. His wife, still to this day, loves to bring up this story. I shadowed a surgery once with this guy who woke up saying, "Give it to me straight, Doc. Will I ever play the piano again?" All of us were cracking up and he then goes, "Oh, wait, I don't know how to play the piano." What's the most disturbing thing you've seen when performing a background check on someone? The place at which I'm a board member fired someone this week for social media, posting pictures of vulnerable individuals and making fun of people with Down syndrome on a personal Facebook. A family member notified staff about the posting. The staff member thought it was outrageous to be fired from the Camp for Special Needs Kids for the posts.
I can't believe I frickin' work with handicapped people all day.
You're fired.
Oh, but boss, I wasn't insulting the differently abled.
Oh?
I was talking about you.
I wouldn't necessarily call it disturbing, but it was the deciding factor in not hiring somebody. We interviewed a guy for an entry-level position. His interview went well, and the other 2 people on the hiring committee were enthusiastic about him, but something about him bothered me. I don't normally check applicants out on Facebook, but I decided to in this case. His most recent post was something to the tune of, "Just got fired again, this is so much bullcrap." Someone asked him in the comments what happened, and his response was, "It was my 3rd no-call, no-show. I was too hungover to bother. Those buttholes had it coming for scheduling me right after a holiday." Entitled, irresponsible, and daft enough to broadcast it in a public post? Sign me up.
I've had applicants say this kind of crap to my face in an interview.
So what you're saying is that your last 4 employers were all out to get you? Seems plausible with no other explanation. A guy who said he had an assault charge 15 years ago. He wasn't lying, but that was the start of 27 pages of criminal history that included 2 years of incarceration, during which time his app said he was self-employed as a carpenter. The history was predominantly assaults, thefts, and possession of illegal substances. I had never seen 27 pages of criminal history on one person. I will add this though, he actually did turn his life around. He ended up working at the gym I went to and then got an additional job at a seafood distributor. I would never have guessed that he was the guy that would turn it all around, but he did.
We had a guy interview a couple of months ago who claimed he had a couple of DUIs in the past. Job doesn't require driving, so not a deal breaker, and they schedule him for a substance screening and physical. Then his background check came back. He didn't have a couple of DUIs, he had 13, along with numerous convictions for theft, assault, domestic violence, substances, etc., totaling 65 pages. He was promptly called and had the job offer rescinded. Boy, feels like you either get none or you get all of the quirks at once in some of these cases. Or the ones who only have a couple of minor offenses aren't problematic enough to be reported here, I suppose. He was hired before I started, much before, but I'd been doing an audit for our files and I noticed his background check had a conviction for his behavior with children, or something like that in the 80s. This was a man my boss regularly had play Santa at Christmas parties, where the children would sit on his lap. This was the moment I realized the president of the company was a fricking moron. But that guy got fired for insubordination like a year or so ago, so there's that. Frick, background checks for anyone that works with children. Not an employer, but I handle work comp claims. Just had a guy complaining complete incapacity while going on 4 trips to Asia and back, as well as hyping his business all on his Facebook page. Just sent a subpoena for his business records, so that should be fun. I used to work in a department that did background checks on potential childcare employees. One guy had been charged with assault of a minor by instrumentation when he worked at a church daycare and had subsequently been let go and charged. He was out on bail and applying to work in a different church daycare. The problem was that he'd only been charged and there was no conviction yet, so he didn't show up on any of the registries. I don't remember how I found out about the charge, but it was an accident. I think it was maybe a newspaper article or something. If an employer checked my background in Facebook, they would just see what a boring life I have.
And you're hired.
With minimum pay.
Mine would just see a bunch of random posts that my mum tags me in, like 4+ a day, and nothing else. Not so much Facebook, but I will Google people. I Googled an applicant we interviewed and seemed to like. Unfortunately, their top results were losing their nursing credentials for writing fake prescriptions for controlled substances. A few years back. And a recent police arrest for driving under the influence and having prescription substances without a prescription. It actually made me sad as they seemed likable, but off. Unfortunately, not in a place to risk trusting someone with such a poor history of judgment and addiction issues.
Question. I deleted all of my social media accounts. Is it a red flag to not be involved in social media?
No, employees might think you're just hard to find, or if your name is common enough that they can't find the right John Smith. I get assigned interns to work with me based on a term or year from the university nearby. I make it a habit to do a quick Facebook search, so I'll recognize their faces from the dozen of other interns when they come in. Lots of party pics, smoking green herb, which is legal here, so in the same realm as those party pics, and women in almost no clothing. Also, lots of mirror ab shots, though my field is largely female-dominated. All I look for is the profile picture, I don't do any digging. All the interns I've actually seen get hired have had very normal profile pictures. You know, smiling, with friends, on a hike, etc. Not because of their pics, but because they're the kind of people who understand professional versus private life, and what is appropriate for public viewing. I was doing background checks for the British Airport Authority during a massive hiring drive in 2007, after there was an attempt to drive a car full of gas canisters into the terminal of Glasgow Airport by 2 Islamic extremists. Due to the need to hire several thousand staff in a few months, the normal requirements relating to job stability, etc., were relaxed, so people who hadn't worked in 10 to 20 years were getting interviewed, which led to a few interesting ones. The only one which I can remember in detail was a guy from Belfast. He hadn't worked since 1990, but they were willing to give him a chance. When we checked his history, he had spent 5 years in HMP, the Maze, due to being convicted of terror offences, before being released as part of the Good Friday Agreement. It turned out that the guy spent his life applying to jobs with long recruitment processes that he couldn't get due to his particular conviction, as that meant he was seen as an active job seeker and wouldn't lose his benefits. Remember Trainspotting when Renton tells the interviewers that he's a smack addict? Similar to that. Strangely enough, he wasn't invited for an interview. In short, a convicted NRA terror fighter applied for a job designed to catch people like him. I work for a background screening company. We do not do social media checks, though we are incredibly thorough, because it can lead to a world of problems. For instance, if you find out that an applicant is gay and deny him the job because he has a criminal record or something, not because he's a homosexual, he can claim discrimination and sue. Consumers have to be provided a copy of their background check after the research is done, so they will see that a social media search was conducted. I hope this makes sense. We do not look for sexual orientation, gender, race, etc. This is a hypothetical situation that explains why not to look at social media for a job. There you go, folks. If you're going to put something suspicious on your social media, make sure you also have posts that align you as some sort of discriminated group. This is why my profile is private and my pic is obscure or of me in a costume, so you're not 100% sure it's me.
You frickin' furry.
Pictures of them smoking green herb or being belligerently drunk. Not that I personally care, but you're just asking for trouble, especially if you're going into a public sector job. Think of it as a reference. Only you're the one giving the feedback on yourself. I actually had one kid who's had a profile picture which was him in the buck, cupping his Johnson with the caption, "Pricks out for Harambe." Did I mention he had applied for our marketing and social media internship? For your information, this was in New York, so unfortunately herb is still illegal. Not sure if anyone understands what public sector means, but this kid was going to be a state employee. You can see the issue. Uncle Sam gives us a checklist of red flags to look out for. Flat Earth, Jack could have fit on the door, moon landing wasn't real, Harambe was murdered, pineapple goes on pizza, wrestling isn't real, Ken Bone was a hero, Ryan Lochte actually got robbed, Coney 2012, the dress was white and gold. If we see any of these, it's an automatic disqualification. This was actually on MySpace back in the day. I was hiring for a position that involved review of patient medical records in a hospital setting, and as you can imagine, involved a great deal of confidentiality and discretion by the person hired for the position. One of the applicants worked at a bank, but had some prior experience in the medical field, so I was considering her for the position. I checked out her MySpace page and found tons of pictures of her in the bank vault, in her undies, posing suggestively with large amounts of money. The contents of the pictures themselves didn't bother me so much as her complete lack of discretion and stupidity in posting these pictures publicly where any of her employers might have found them. I was disgusted thinking about what she might have done with others' private health information if we had hired her. We had a 40-something lady apply, and whilst doing the usual checks, we went to her Facebook to find her profile picture is of her husband, and her daughter at a swingers party, all completely au naturel, and her with a different man behind her. We were dumbstruck. Second-degree murder. We didn't hire. I'm not an employer, but a few years after I resigned from a job that I'd worked at for years, I found I needed to contact my old GM. I called where I used to work and discovered he had quit, so I decided to look him up online. That's when I discovered that the guy I was working for prior to him becoming my GM had 2 crystal convictions under his belt. I can't judge though, he was one of the most awesome people I've ever worked for. I just thought it was funny. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was trying to hire a nanny. This girl sends me her application. Everything looks really good. So I put her phone number into Facebook to see what it's like and add her to mine. Her background photo is a girl, on all fours with a bra and panties on and a guy about to do a line off her butt. I was going to send her an email saying, due to your Facebook page, I won't be interviewing you. My husband told me not to help out other parents she's trying to get a job from.
I'm a nanny, and I make sure my Facebook is squeaky clean. Granted, I'm a squeaky clean kind of person, but I always think about what I'm posting pictures of, or what or how that will reflect on me. It doesn't help that my last 2 bosses and their parents all asked to add me on Facebook, and my current boss sent me a friend request. But I guess it says something about me when the last 2 families love me enough to want to keep up with me and still include me in their lives. All they see is cute smiling pictures of me and cats. Lots of pictures of cats. I teach small children. I live in the lumen fear that my students will learn I have vices like drinking and swearing. Everything is friends locked except for some generic, watch me do completely normal things, photos and quotes. The rule I tell younger people is it something you're comfortable with your boss, grandparents, or a small child seeing? I had a reference once tell me that they had let the guy go for stalking his ex-wife from the company phones. That was his reference. One guy was a huge Phillies fan. End of story.
I check Facebook for all my hires. I love the ones who have their page public, so I get to see all of their crazy. Seriously, why try to get a job when you've worked at 10 plus jobs in the past year and laugh when you get fired for not doing your job? Or when you post videos of doing stupid crap at work? Or talking about your substance use and partying every night? Or baby daddy drama? Or like when you keep getting locked up in a county jail over and over. Or when you leave a ton of negative reviews of other small businesses acting like servers are your servants when you're applying for a server position. Or baby mama drama. Or these are just the ones I remember off the top of my head, and all of these are actual things I've seen. FYI, be smart, people. Hide that crap. I once started to do business with someone and decided to check their Facebook. Multiple walls of text about B and C words they had to work with pictures of the individual looking tough to the camera. I figured that when you have beef with everyone you work with, you're a problem. I cut off business after they failed to even show up for our first meeting. It's not disturbing, but a good story. Before my company had HR, I did the interviews with a couple of other people. I interviewed this girl who seemed like a good fit. After the interviews, I looked her up on Facebook. She had just posted, "I just had a job interview. I think it went well. The pay is crap though." The pay wasn't crap considering she had no experience, so my first thought was the obvious. I'm not going to hire her. Later that evening I was in Target and I happened to see her working there. She didn't see me. She had this big smile on her face and was the aura of someone who was very positive. The next day, I did hire her. 5 years later, she worked her way up pretty high. She has an awesome career in digital marketing now. She has no idea. The pay being fair doesn't preclude it also being crap. Likely she was talking crap to her friends to sound cool rather than being legitimately ungrateful. Not disturbing, the opposite. We interviewed a kid who was a total bag of nerves but seemed good, otherwise. Just bad at interviews. When we looked him up, his Facebook said something like, "Crashed and burned in an interview today, really down, I would have loved to get that job." We had a big discussion about whether it was genuine, but I figured if he was playing us, it was worthy of a reward anyway. He worked out great. Illegal discharge of a piece from a moving vehicle which caused great bodily harm. Man, why bother trying when we said no felons? My boss interviewed him to maybe find out if it was an accident. Nope. He shot his brother in a heated argument after a drive-by they did together. Said brother is now a quad. It's for a bail bondsman agency too. Moron. I am not a manager, but most of my team participates in interviewing potential teammates. I was preparing for an interview and I routinely Google their names to see what comes up. In the past, I've been pleasantly surprised to find industry-related accolades that the applicant was too humble to list on their resume. But this time, I came up with a long string of blog posts. I got sucked into the rabbit hole at that point, and the next 2 hours were spent reading all of these blog entries about this wife who was involved in widespread internet trolling and bullying. There were websites dedicated to how horrible this woman was, people invested in domain names related to the message, and paid for hosting just to call her out. So I was left with quite the dilemma. As a result of her bullying, her victims and opponents had dedicated quite a bit of time to doxing her, and as a result, her husband and his employer. I figured that I would hold on to this information and only inform my boss if we all felt he was a solid candidate that we would hire. The guy came in for the interview, and while I was asking him questions the whole time, I was thinking about his insane wife, but not saying a word. He somehow worked into the conversation that he'd recently divorced, which at the moment further complicated the issue in my mind. When we met as a team after the interviews to discuss how he'd performed, my boss said he wasn't impressed with his responses to the technical questions and didn't seem like a good fit for the team, which was a huge relief to me. I'm not certain what the right call would have been if he had been a good fit. It would be wrong to judge him based upon his ex-wife's actions, but if there's an army of people on the internet targeting her husband's employer in efforts to get him fired, that can be a headache to deal with. Had an intern that was working with our social media marketing group. She put in a really hateful ticket about how she needed Facebook open on the web gateway filter for her job. So one of the guys on our team looked her up on social media just kind of interested. Here was a big long post about how incompetent IT was at my company and how she had to get on her personal cell phone to browse. We all thought her boss should see her post. She was gone the next day. Seriously, you talk crap about the boss's backs to friends and family, not in a place the bosses will find out. Seemed like an average kid, but the entire Twitter feed was furry adult content. Not an employer and not about me, but my mother does check some of her customers out on Facebook for her Amazon and eBay deals. She's a third-party seller on both sites. She once got an order and looked on the person's Facebook. The person was bragging repeatedly there about how she had scammed multiple Amazon sellers out of inventory and got her money back. She cancelled the order for the textbook via Amazon. The customer asked her why she cancelled it. Mom reported that customer and pointed it out to the customer. She shouldn't have her Facebook set on public mode if she wanted to scam sellers. I heard that customer was banned from Amazon soon after that. Oh boy, I once interviewed a guy for an entry-level manufacturing position. He was in his mid-30s, I guess, and he seemed alright, if not a little socially awkward, and mentioned he wanted the job because he had a baby on the way, and wanted something solid as he was picking up odd jobs with relatives' companies. This job required basically no skill, so we hired nearly everyone we interviewed. After he left, I went back to my desk and looked him up on Facebook. He was obsessed with Rihanna. Photoshopped himself into pictures with her, had her as his cover photo, and had a lot of softcore adult content with her head photoshopped onto the models. Nearly every one of his status updates were about her. It was freaking weird as heck. The kicker, though, was that his profile picture was him with a photoshopped picture of a pregnant Rihanna with his hand on her belly. He did not get a call back. You know what? I'm starting to think that he might not have actually had a baby on the way. Used to be a staffing consultant and had to background check everyone. Had somebody with first-degree murder pop up. That was pretty weird considering we do the backgrounds while they're in the office. Had another guy have a B&D pop up, and he wanted to explain. He and some friends broke into a co-op and put all the feed against the door so the owner couldn't get in. It was meant to be a prank, and now it's on his record. My supervisor wouldn't let us hire him, which I thought was lame. Don't do dumb things as adults, kids. I interviewed a guy in his late 50s. He hadn't worked for years as he had been a single parent to 4 kids. He passed the interview, support position working with elderly people. We then went on to discuss a DBS check, which is where you check any criminal record. He said it would be fine, he didn't have a record. He then asked me how long records stay on the system for. I said, what am I looking for? Forever. Oh, he said. Well, I do have something to admit to. My wife said I shouldn't say anything about it, but I guess I'll have to. When my first wife left, I couldn't work because of the kids, so I got involved in adult films. I'm not sure how, but it led to films involving the kids, and I was sent to prison. The room went silent. I honestly did not know what to say. I was just aware that I was in a room, alone, in an empty office with this disgusting, vile man. He must have known and said, I'll take it I haven't got the job. I said, sorry, no. And he left. I wish I'd said more, but I was so shocked and a bit scared. Red pill and racist pages they've liked or commented on. Some guy had an incredible resume and interviewed really well. Then we saw his comment on Mexicans and one particular recent school shooting. Yeah, we passed. Not an employer, but when I was working at my last job, my supervisor would always come up in my suggested friends. I'm quiet and reserved, so she was probably curious. I had a goofy, memey profile picture and a cover photo of Louis Theroux at the time. Don't think it would have been too disturbing. I recently took a promotion and I'm working on my replacement in my prior role. The job requires you to be extremely reliable and able to work with generally no supervision. We're taking our time and doing several levels of interviews as well as informal meetings such as dinners or lunches. Those tend to catch people off guard and I get free food. 2 weeks ago, I was poking around a lady's Facebook page, and most of it was pretty normal, until I found her comment on an article about a cop shooting a dog. She referenced the owners of the dog as monkeys, these people were African American, and sided with the cop on shooting the chained-up dog. Her profile was extremely professional except for the article comments. The monkey comment was just the tip. This lady was a full-bore racist. Ex-prisoners. What's the most disturbing thing you've ever heard or witnessed from a fellow prisoner? As the narrator, I feel inclined to warn people that there are some pretty extreme descriptions of violence in these posts. I really mean it. I've done a few grim videos in the past, but there was at least one story here that I had to take a long walk after. You've been warned. One of the women I was in with was in for life. The reason that she was in was because someone had sold her fake smack, so she had decided to murder this person. She goes to their house, cuts the gas line, and burns the house down. Turns out she had the wrong house and killed an entire family in their sleep. She tried to punk me out a few times, but I don't take people seriously if we can't communicate, like intelligent human beings. She was obviously trying to avoid herself in all areas. It was really sad. Had a pool table while locked up. Nobody used the cues or balls to do stuff, because if you got our pool table taken away, you'd better hope they took you away from us too. If fights drew blood, everyone would come out of the woodwork with their little hand towels to clean up all the blood before the COs would come out. I have a very funny image in my head of several thuggish dudes cleaning up blood from a fight. Oh, you missed a spot, Reggie. Sorry about that, Todd. I'll get right on that. 6 months in Rikers Island, New York. Watched a girl try to drown herself in her cell toilet for 2 hours, just running her head in, trying to stay under, while COs stood and laughed. When they left, she peed on the floor to flood the cell to get their attention again. Not a prisoner, but my professor works with prisoners. She told us she had this client that had recently got out of jail, telling her that the most enjoyable thing in prison was the group's therapy session. He said, "I really love the group therapy because it gave me ideas of other people's emotions when confessing their crimes. It taught me the emotions I'm supposed to feel when confessing in court again to reduce my sentence next time." She was really surprised that this serial killer is that honest, and she was really spooked at the same time. Oh god, there's someone taking acting courses in prison for how to get a shorter sentence so that they can get back out and commit more crimes quicker. I went to jail for about 3 weeks because of driving with a suspended license. We all slept in these huge rooms with bathroom and living area connected. About a week in, I hear some guy get up and use the small microwave that we're given in the living area to make stuff hot like ramen. It's not normal for the microwave to be used after lights out, but I figured that maybe he had a roll or something he wanted to heat up and munch on before sleeping. The guard posted on the far wall never said anything to him or even got up from his seat, though I could tell from my bunk he was watching the inmate. So the guy comes back to the bed area and walks right past me with his bowl in his hands. I close my eyes and try to go to sleep, but the silence is shattered by a blood-curdling scream from a couple of rows down. The guy had filled a bowl with baby oil and heated it till boiling, and then poured it on some guy's face in his sleep. Found out later that they had some kind of fight a few days earlier, and the baby oil guy was out for revenge. Burn guy had third-degree burns on his face, neck, shoulders, and chest. Baby oil guy was taken away, and we never heard from him again. Also, we lost our microwave, so to heat things up we had to use hot water from the sink and just let stuff sit in it forever to heat it up. Sucked to be sure, but not as bad as being covered in boiling fricking oil. This is why you can't have nice things in prison. My dad was telling me about how in the POW camp in Colditz in World War II, officers had to eventually ban fricking everything because stuff was being used to either smuggle in contraband or be used as tools for escape and whatnot. Pretty much the only luxury the prisoners had was fruit jam, until a man was found in the yard one day, blinded by the moonshine that was made from it. So this jam was banned too. Well, they may have taken 99% of our luxuries, but at least we still have the delicious jam? Actually. Oh god damn it, Barry. I was in a holding cell for unpaid tickets once. It was way overcrowded. They brought in a new guy who complained right as he entered. "Ah, hell no. There are too many people in here, man." He sat quietly for a few minutes while another inmate talked crap to the annoyance of most everyone else. Finally, the new guy, who was bigger than anyone else in the cell and clearly the most veteran inmate, walked up to the talker guy. "Sorry, man, I ain't sitting in here no more. It's too crowded. You need to shut the frick up." He then punched talker guy in the face and then went to the door and started pounding it. "Guard, I just punched this dude. Come get me." The guards were already on their way, and as they pulled him out, he left with these words of wisdom and commands to the guards. "Y'all take me to solitary. I take the assault rap because it's too frickin' crowded and hot in here. It's inhumane to keep so many people in here. Take me to solitary." I envied his clever escape and reminded myself that I was only there for a traffic ticket, and as much as solitary sounded like heaven, it might not be worth emulating his departure strategy. Never been to prison, but when I worked in the ER, I saw a lot of prisoners come in with all sorts of injuries, but two really stand out. The first one was a guy who was shanked in the abdomen and his intestines were literally hanging out. I remember he was stone-faced and wasn't saying anything. Just looked straight ahead. I'm sure he'd been given pain meds, but still. We slid him on the stretcher and I remember I went to move him up the bed a little bit and as soon as I started to slide him up, he grabbed my arm and said, "Hold up a minute, homie, that hurts a little bit," in the most nonchalant voice I've ever heard. The second was a guy who tried to kill himself by stripping into the buck and just laying on the cold floor for hours. The floor was so cold, it ended up dropping his core temperature to around 92 degrees Fahrenheit. A quiet kid we called Harry Potter because of his glasses. He was pretty young and definitely lacking in street smarts, and we could never figure out why he was there. Until we caught the news from a guard that he threw a pot of boiling water on his wheelchair-bound grandma because she was being too loud while he watched his favorite TV show. Out of all the sick crap people were locked up for, that one is pretty hard to swallow. If you ever got locked up, remember to always be respectful of those around you because you never know what kinds of messed up people are in there with you. Stories I've heard firsthand, one guy was locked up with a heap of smack still shoved up his butt. He was popular. Another guy got noticeably drunk on someone else's booze, prompting a lockdown and search. He died from a head injury a few days later. Another group of guys teased the necrophiliac until he had a breakdown and chased them through prison trying to kill them. They hid behind a guard, peeing themselves, laughing while he was subdued. Fun times. I was in juvenile prison. I'd just gotten into the intake unit. The guy that was escorted into the building behind me had committed the unspeakable act. Well, we walked into the unit and some kid walks up to him and starts beating his face. He takes out a toothbrush and starts shoving it up his butt. The COs didn't let that go on too long, but it caused some serious damage. Well, some guys from the unit told me he crapped himself and couldn't control it. Turns out the guy that beat up the crapping boy was the older brother of the boy that had the unspeakable act committed against him by Crap Boy. The most disgusting thing I saw and smelled was when I was on lockup. This one inmate took a coffee bag, filled it with 3-week-old bodily fluids. He then gets out for his 1-hour rec and proceeds to place the open part underneath this other guy's cell door and stomp on the bag. It sprayed the most disgusting, rancid concoction of bodily fluids all over this inmate. After his epic display of biological warfare, he pulled down his pants and shook his wang at the inmates he had just crapped all over. As the man writing this script, I can tell you that you do not want to know the specific fluids that the author wrote that went into the bag. But it was all of them. Whatever you're thinking, it was all in there in a nasty cocktail. Gross. I pleasured myself in a holding cell, not knowing there were cameras watching me. 2 officers walked in telling me to put my wang away because there was a lady watching me on the cameras. Honestly, I was so mortified that I forgot that I was about to get reamed in court. How in the heck did you get in the mood to crank it before court in a holding cell? What the frick else am I supposed to do? 20 hours on a wooden bench with no shoes on, and the floor is so nasty you don't even want to touch it. Ah, the old forlorn nut. Caught guilty of underage drinking. A guy that was there when I got there gets up after an hour or so of me coming in. He goes and sits down on the toilet that's in the same small room as the 10 of us guys that were there, right in front of the window to the officer's desk area/office, and has explosive diarrhea. It's horrible, breathing through our shirts for 2 hours. New guy comes in and is told from an experienced player that he should try and make himself throw up so he won't be in as long. They release you when you're sober. So what's he do? Puts his drunk head into the toilet bowl, rests his face on the seat, and passes out. It was a gross, gross day. Obligatory, not me, but someone I know. They went to federal prison in Ontario for getting caught with a lot of substances. Anyway, he told me that they put smack addicts in with the general population, but they're given a small cup of methadone each morning at a certain time, and they'd sit in the chair and wait for their bodies to absorb it. What some guys would do, though, was shake in their chairs to try and stave off the absorption, and then when they'd get back in their cells later, they'd induce vomiting into a sock inside of a can and use that as a filter. Then it was for sale. Yeah, doing regurgitated smack is a thing in Canadian prison. Severe violence and death of an infant warning. I did a few years in a state prison and saw and heard a lot of brutal, crazy stuff. Murders, the unspeakable acts, fatal amounts of substance use, riots. But the one thing that's never left me was a story a guy told me about his murder case. He was babysitting his girlfriend's new baby, a few months old, and the baby wouldn't stop crying, so he put it in a pillowcase and slammed it against a wall for 20 minutes. He said he knew the baby was messed up after the first hit, but he just kept going. Said it was like a bloody pulp sack. Stuff really messed me up. Also, one of the other bad ones I saw was a guy get stabbed through the eye with a 10-inch knife. Dude dropped, killing him instantly, and he never saw it coming. A couple of people put him in a laundry cart, and the COs didn't find him for about 10 hours. The guy who killed him was 19 and serving an 11-month sentence. He said he just wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. They convicted him, federal, for capital murder, and he got like 99 years. Unfortunately, there's a lot of young kids who go in with small sentences and never get out. Worked at a maximum security mental health facility. A guy talked about how he didn't understand why he was having nightmares about boiling lobsters alive. This was 5 minutes after he talked about how he killed his ex-girlfriend, cut her up, and boiled her head because she was accusing him of cheating. Oh, and how if he could just talk to her parents, they would understand because she wasn't a good person. I was in administrative isolation, and there was a guy across the way who kept smearing his crap on the plexiglass so the COs couldn't see inside. The guards were sick of his crap, quite literally, so one night when he did it, the CO on watch dared the guy to lick his own poop off the glass. He did. Christmas time in jail. It may have been Christmas Eve, not sure. Many years ago. Nighttime. Around 8 p.m., I guess. They had huts, which could sleep about 20 guys each. I was in the short-timers hut. For some reason, they called the long-timers long sweeps. No idea why. Anyway, a bunch of long sweepers started gathering around our hut, just outside the chain-link fence. Massive guys, tats on arms, and even fingers, and all carrying a little something in their fist. Group gets up to about 12 guys, all standing around silently, saying nothing, and we were getting pretty nervous. Then, just as it gets dark, a couple of little possums crawl down out of one of the trees. Little Aussie sugar gliders. Yeah, they really can fly or glide between the trees. Here's a bunch of the biggest, baddest dudes I've ever seen, standing around waiting to hand-feed little possums bread and sugar. They were very gentle with them. My brother told me a story about pre-prison when he was in jail. He bunked with a substance addict who was seemingly just dope sick as frick. He said he was moaning and groaning all night. He tried to tell the COs he needed help, but they ignored him, left him be. Then he puked all over himself, and the COs still wouldn't help him. They just left him there all pukey. Then after a while he started seizing. He had 2 seizures. COs did nothing. They thought he was faking. My brother said about an hour later he stopped making noises. He was silent, so he checked on him. He was grey and unresponsive, totally slipped away. Fricking buttholes let a technically innocent man die of benzo withdrawal overnight. I've seen COs ignore a man who was having a seizure on 3 different occasions. Also, same man every time. It was the scariest thing to witness someone dropping and having a seizure, and the guards were just laughing it off like, "Don't worry, this happens every time he's here." It was fricked up. They did get him help, but they didn't seem to care too much either. Oh, I have one. My friend was a former medical assistant at a local prison. She told me a pretty gross story that happened a while back. One of the inmates, a male, was being manipulated by one of the COs. The CO made the inmate give him oral, and when he tried to tell someone about it, no one believed him. So after the end of oral, the inmate saved the semen in his mouth, spit it in a napkin, and had his family send out the semen to get tested, and that's how the CO was caught. It was on the news and everything, I'm pretty sure. Honestly, as awful as that story is, I'm just glad to be posting one that has an element of justice in it, since most of these are stories of just the awful stuff that goes on inside these places. Mum was a CO at Hancock State Penitentiary in Georgia. Here are my favorite 3. The nicest guy in the place asks my mum if she wants to know what he's in for. He told her that he caught his wife cheating, so he just went and sat in his recliner to calm down. She came out and wouldn't stop apologizing after he told her to leave him alone, so he literally cut her face off. During a riot, inmates are doubled bunk in solitary confinement for a weekend. A young kid, presumably a snitch, was locked in with a significantly larger and older gangbanger notorious for the unspeakable act. The kid spent some time in hospital. You don't need details. Mum came upon a man who was stabbed in the skull right before his release. 6-inch shank sticking out of the top of his head. He kept calling out for his daughter. He didn't make it. Job screwed my mum up to the point where she started smuggling substances into the prison, and we no longer have a relationship. Don't go to prison, folks. I'm a Canadian, however I got caught up in the US federal prison system, USP Atlanta. This place, my friends, is as nasty as it gets. A new fish came in, and after doing his obligatory time in the SHU, he got moved into my unit. When he arrived, he was asked if he had any contraband with him by some of the other brothers. He made a vital mistake by telling them no, but later opening up to his cellie that he had some green herb. In prison, it doesn't take long for the block to know what's going on, and so that next morning when this guy went to the shower, he was jumped by a half dozen or so guys. They proceeded to fill up shampoo bottles with warm water and soap, then stuck them halfway up his butt in order to get the green herb out. Although this definitely would have cleaned him out, it didn't force the green herb out. One of the brothers then put on a rubber glove and went straight into the guy's butthole in order to get it out. Once they got what they were after, they proceeded to knock the guy out and hang him up to send the message. It was pretty messed up, and there was nothing anybody could do. He learned the hard way. I was in a cell for a week in a Denver city jail. My cellmate was in for the week waiting on a pickup to take him over to the ICE holding. He was older, and since he was being held and transferred over an immigration issue, he was deemed low risk. It turns out he was a famous Ethiopian torturer who had killed and maimed hundreds of prisoners. He was part of the Red Terror and was not a good guy. Being in 23-hour lockdown with this guy in a cell the size of a walk-in closet was interesting to say the least. So I've never been incarcerated, however I used to work for our local jails as a medical officer. Still to this day, I'm traumatized by abscesses the size of golf balls, leaking smelly green pus, and a girl we like to refer to as Pharmacy Snatch. Pharmacy Snitch was found taking pills in the book holding cells and somehow smuggled these pills into Gen Pop. She entered my clinic with her hands in her uniform, and I kept hearing a rustling sound of some sort. I promptly called the acting captain in to investigate, and had to witness the good old squat and cough. As Pharmacy Snatch did as she was told, a rubber glove containing 20 pills, a Bic pipe, foils, and a lighter fell out. She had some more pills in her uniform shirt and shoe as well, which is where I heard the noise. She tried to throw it behind my desk. I didn't actually go to prison, but I spent a year in Los Angeles County Jail, which is the most infamous for being the suckiest system in the US. It does suck. It sucks terribly. 1. It was my first week and I was sitting on my bunk when I suddenly hear what sounds like a rabbit dying a gruesome death. Turns out a guy got caught stealing and was getting stomped out. The thief was getting his head stomped on by 3 other guys, over which I found out later was a stolen ramen packet. What went through my mind was, these people are going to put this poor guy into a wheelchair over $1. Not a pretty sight for a first-timer, but what I remember most was the screaming. I reiterate that it sounded just like a rabbit getting mauled. Poor guy left on a stretcher. 2. I heard this from an OG who's been in and out of the system. Apparently upstate, in prison, there's a guy from Grape Street Crip who went by the name Purple Passion. Supposedly, Purple Passion was 6'3", 250 plus pounds, and who once he found someone he liked would KO the unfortunate victim and reap the spoils. If he liked it, he'll leave an unwrapped and bitten Snickers bar. If not, then a wrapped Snickers bar. Now, what went through my mind was, how could someone be so cruel yet so considerate as to plant a Snickers afterwards? Also heard of others, if not the same person, going by a different name, Snickers Bandit, and El Joto Magnifico Caliente. 3. You can hear a popping sound, closest I can describe, when someone is stabbed. 4. The Asians, or others, used to have their own exclusive dorm, but that was revoked in the early 2000s when an inmate was killed. I can't remember whether it was over a gambling dispute or because he'd done stuff to kids. Supposedly, there was an attempt to conceal the killing by snapping the bones of the deceased and dismembering the limbs with crude instruments. They then stuffed what parts they couldn't flush down the toilet into the laundry cart. 5. Inmates are housed in either dorms, 60-foot by 90-foot rooms that hold 64 to 96 people, or in cells. I was housed in the former. So we're kept in these concrete boxes, and when a riot pops off due to interracial disputes, there's no place to escape when they start sending in tear gas grenades. If you ever found yourself in one, smear baby oil or Vaseline on your face and wrap a wet towel or t-shirt around. 6. Offenses involving children are frowned upon, even if consensual. There was this one guy, first-timer like myself, who had apparently given substances to a 15-year-old girl, and they did it. We're sitting in the day room, and he's telling us this like it's something to brag about, and assuredly it got everyone's attention. There were 2 other guys he shared his cell with, both having come down from prison for an added charge. After retiring to our cells, we hear a yell and a scuffle. Turns out the man in question was getting his own comeuppance in non-consensual relations. The entire cell block was cheering this on. The raucous eventually recedes and then silence. Slowly, the smell of feces just permeates throughout the block. The guy had the unspeakable act committed against him, and from what I heard, he stayed under his bunk until the next shower day when he rushed out of his cell begging the guards for help. The food was inhumane. No identifiable meat, plus everything had to be able to be eaten with a spoon because they weren't about to hand out forks and knives. Fun few days. Yep, a family member of mine was in jail for a couple of years for carrying green herb. Don't ask, he was in there way too long and the whole situation was super messed up. He said one of the worst things was the food. They had to eat some mushy Bologna stuff that made him gag when he even talks about it. He said they saw a starving cat outside once and they put the Bologna out for it to eat. The cat smelled it, shook its head in obvious disgust, and ran away. Holy crap, I thought they were about to eat the cat. I was sent to a woman's prison for about 5 years, and there was a girl in there who was famous for getting high on crystal while babysitting an 8-year-old and then killed the kid. Another one that I found disturbing was a girl who threw her newborn into the trash after she went into labor at home. I mean, you hear about this kind of stuff all the time and it's messed up, but then to be surrounded by people who've actually done it is freaking nuts. Also, it was heartbreaking to see mothers getting visits from their young children, always tears from both parties because mummy still can't come home. A lot of these women were actually good people who just made stupid mistakes. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.